Chapter 1175. Qin Huayuan's words made everyone's expression change. These days, they had been stationed at the border. Jiziyu had been stationed at Beijiang for many years, so he was very familiar with the various strongholds here. As such, the Dragon Legion Corps had been assigned to guard Tianyu, Tianshu, Tianmin, and Tianling. The Southern Pacifying Army, the Huban Army, and the other troops sent to protect the emperor were also stationed at the border between the two countries. The continuous stretch of white tents was like a vast ocean, completely blocking the Tatars' wild ambition to go south outside the country's gate. They were all people of the Zhou, and they had had enough of the Tatans' harassment. Furthermore, the hot-blooded men in the army had personally come to the battlefield. The joy of victory and the passion of protecting the country was naturally different from what normal people understood. The strategists were happy about this battle, but they also cared a lot about Qin Huayuan's troops descending from the sky. Some people felt that Wang Yi had arranged for a surprise attack, while others felt that Qin Huayuan had formed his own troops and then turned back to help his son-in-law. Some people were also curious about how many of Wang Yi's relatives were still alive. However, no one dared to directly ask about this curiosity. They placed their attention on the future decisions. Someone asked Qin Huayuan, "You are right, but there are still some things that I don't understand. The emperor has been wary of Wang Yi for a long time. Now that the battle is over, it is time to put the bow away. Even if he doesn't do that, the emperor will give an edict, right?" "You are right," Qin Huayuan nodded and said, "However, we naturally have to set up a platform to watch the show. Furthermore, no matter how overboard the emperor's actions are, he has a way to cover it up. Now we have to give him a chance to stop doing so." "Is the previous dynasty's imperial seal real?" another strategist asked. Pang Shao nodded and said, "The imperial jade seal indeed belongs to Beiji. Prince Zhou Lian carried the imperial jade seal with him when he was outside. It was Sister Yi who saved Zhou Lian's life by chance. She then helped him settle down." Everyone couldn't help but sigh. The imperial jade seal that Li Qiqian couldn't find anywhere was unexpectedly found by a weak woman like Wang Fei. Wasn't this too lucky? "Wang Fei, you're really lucky." "That's not it. This old man feels that the heavens have chosen Wang Yi and have given Wang Yi such an opportunity." "That's right. After this incident, I'm sure that the old remnants of the previous dynasty will become restless." The ministers of the previous dynasty already had a limited sense of belonging to the Zhou. I think the ideology of Beiji has been deeply rooted for many years. The appearance of the imperial seal is already shocking enough, not to mention the presence of a prince. With the prince of the previous dynasty, some of these officials will definitely have high hopes for the restoration of the northern Ji country. We don't know what they will do then. Su Weiji smiled and looked at Pang Shao without saying anything. Only a small number of people knew that Wang Fei didn't save a prince of the previous dynasty, but a princess of the previous dynasty. This feeling of having secrets with Pang Shao made people feel that they were particularly important. Su Weiji and the others who knew about this only smiled and didn't speak, looking leisurely and profound. At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside the tent. Huzi strode in and presented a torn piece of paper to Pang Shao. Panting, he said, "Wang Yi, this is an open letter written by the Prince of Beiji to Wang Yi and Duke Ding. It's posted in Tianyu Pass." "What?" All the strategists were shocked. They stood up and said, "We were just talking about this. I didn't expect the Prince of Beiji to not follow the rules." "That's right. If I didn't know that this was Wang Fei's arrangement, I would be so shocked that my jaw would drop." The words in the letter were simple. First, it expressed its love and sympathy for the people. Then, it praised Pang Shao and Jiziyu for their outstanding military achievements and patriotism. The main point was at the end, where it made a straightforward request. The world is peaceful, and the people live and work in peace. This will be a long time. The current emperor, Li Qiqian, is muddle-headed and incompetent. He is selfish and ungrateful. He doesn't care about the safety of the people. After ascending the throne, he selfishly seeks benefits everywhere. He doesn't care about natural disasters or the lives of the people. He uses the limited silver to repair his own bedchamber, but he makes the soldiers who help him pay for their own expenses. He even exploits the loyal officials and uses all their wealth to provide disaster relief. Such a muddle-headed ruler is useless. He is incompetent and harms his loyal officials. This is not what a wise ruler should do. Therefore, I propose to abolish the title of the Zhou and restore the Beiji dynasty so that the people can live in peace and happiness forever. Pang Xiao looked at the contents of the open letter. He first narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then his eyes flashed, and he suddenly looked up to meet Qin Huayuan's gaze. Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded while stroking his beard. Su Weiji, who was standing at the side, thought about it 1,000 times. In the end, he smiled in relief. It seems that Wang Yi will return to the capital soon. It seems that Sir Su agrees that Wang Yi should listen to this proposal. A strategist asked unhappily. Su Weiji smiled. This old man thinks that this is quite reasonable. The emperor is heartless. It is indeed time to change the dynasty so that the people can live better lives. This is also the reason why we have followed Wang Yi all these years. Sir Su is right. But why should Wang Yi listen to the words of a Beiji prince and restore the Beiji dynasty? That's right. As soon as these words came out, a few people immediately nodded in agreement and said angrily, "His Highness has been on the battlefield for many years and has made great contributions. How much effort has he put in? Why should he listen to the orders of a child at the last moment?" Everyone was just short of shouting, "Wang Yi should be the emperor." This was partly their sincerity, but it was also partly because of their own selfishness. If the one they followed was the emperor, they might become ministers, and from then on they would change their allegiance and soar to the sky. But if the person they followed was a minister, they could only be aides. Then what was the purpose of all the hard work they had put in these days? Pang Xiao naturally understood their thoughts. Just as he was about to comfort them, Qin Huayuan smiled and raised his hand to stop him. Miraculously, the agitated people calmed down and looked at Qin Huayuan questioningly. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "This old man understands your feelings and has the same thoughts as all of you. But you are all confused because of your concern. I'm afraid you have forgotten who released this Beiji prince and who put up this notice." The tent suddenly fell silent. The people who were arguing just now suddenly understood and couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. "We were really confused. I actually forgot the most important thing. You are also confused because of your concern." Qin Huayuan and Pang Xiao both waved their hands. Since the princess consort had deliberately arranged it, everyone knew what was going on. "Wang Yi, are you planning to return to the capital?" Everyone's eyes gathered on Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao took a deep breath, and his eyes gradually became firm. "Yes, it is time to return to the capital. Let's start preparing these days." The entire Dezhou was immersed in a jubilant atmosphere these days, especially the people in the capital. Every day, it was as if they were celebrating the new year. Even those who usually haggled with others didn't bicker anymore. Li Qitian, however, wasn't as relaxed as everyone thought. It wasn't difficult to capture these people and kill them. But now, the biggest problem was Pang Xiao. He was a brave and good fighter who held a large number of troops at the northern border and could bring troops back to attack at any time. Without the threat of Tayton, the threat of his imperial court seemed to be more serious than before. The most infuriating thing was the open letter that Zhou Yin had written to Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. This time, it wasn't just in the capital, but in all the major cities in the country. This person held the imperial jade seal and specialized in slandering him. He also wanted to instigate his subordinates to rebel. His wild ambition was obvious. These days, at least 3 or 4 sets of porcelain in the imperial study in Yangxin Palace Hall had to be replaced every day. Even this wasn't enough for Li Qitian to smash. "Bastard!" Another angry roar came from the palace hall, followed by the sound of porcelain shattering that the eunuchs were already used to. Li Qitian flew into a rage and cursed incessantly. Xiong Jinshui led the eunuchs to quietly clean up the mess, but they accidentally became the emperor's punching bag. Every one of them was kicked several times. "Kill him. We want to kill him." After venting enough, Li Qiqian calmed down a lot. He sat down quietly and thought about countermeasures. After a while, he summoned a few trusted aides and spies to make a series of arrangements. "Go to the north and contact Jilon. Quickly send us a message." "Yes, Your Majesty, don't worry. We will definitely take care of this matter." Li Qiqian nodded and said, "Oh, that's right. I forgot to deal with the Taytan Kagan these days. Bring these people to the imperial court tomorrow. We will deal with them accordingly." "Yes, Your Majesty." This reply was very exciting. It was clear that everyone couldn't wait to see what would happen to Si Qin. Si Qin, Bien Ruhan, and the others who were locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison were being closely guarded. Today, they had a rare chance to eat a good meal, but none of them were able to eat it with ease. Bien Ruhan looked at the bowl of fragrant white rice and the red braised pork on top of it. Tears streamed down his face. She scrambled to her feet in a panic and grabbed the wooden bars of the prison cell as she shouted, "I want to see Your Majesty. Your Majesty is my brother-in-law. I want to see Your Majesty. Someone come. Someone come. I don't want to die." The woman's shrill voice reverberated in the prison cell. The echoes seemed to come from afar. Lu Wenru was locked up in the cell next door. She glanced at Bien Ruhan and said coldly, "What were you doing earlier? When Master was in trouble, you never thought of helping him. Instead, you kept making things difficult for Master. Now that we're talking about your status, do you think that anyone will care about you? I advise you to save it. If you eat and drink your fill, you won't become a hungry ghost." Bien Ruhan shook her head. She was so frightened that her entire body trembled. How could she still eat? She was suddenly given a good meal. Wasn't it because they wanted to kill her? She would be escorted to the execution ground tomorrow, and her head would be chopped off with a knife. She was still so young. Why should she die? "Lu Hong, you bastard. You're the one who killed yourself, but you don't care if I live or die. It's all your fault. It's all because of you. Even if I become a ghost, I won't let you off." Bien Ruhan cursed angrily. However, no matter how frightened she was, the sun would still rise the next day. Time waited for no one. Chapter 1176. What else could there be? This is the best time to praise his own achievements. Li Qiqian won't let go of this opportunity. Bing Tang curled his lips. Qin Yining sighed. "I'm afraid that after today, those people will all be executed. Could it be that Princess Consort sympathizes with them?" Ji Yin saw Qin Yining frown and couldn't help but ask. Qin Yining raised his eyes in surprise and then laughed. "Do you think I'm some kind of Buddha-hearted person? Those people aren't innocent. It's not unjust for them to end up like this." Although Qin Yining felt regret and sorrow for the loss of life, it was also because of his respect for the original existence of life. It wasn't because of his kindness. At the court meeting, a row of cages was placed in the open space in front of Fengtian Hall. The people in the cages were all gagged with ashen faces. They could only watch in despair as the officials in the hall looked on like livestock. Today, the officials didn't have to abide by the rules as they usually did. They all pointed at the cages, and some of the more hot-tempered generals even pointed at Si Qin and cursed at him, cursing his ancestors, especially his female ancestors. Their vulgar words attracted the attention of the civil officials. Li Qiqian sat on the dragon throne and looked down at the people in the cages. A sense of pride rose from the bottom of his heart. He carefully observed their expressions and saw that even Si Qin was a bit nervous and trembling. His heart felt unprecedentedly refreshed. For many years, the Taytan's invasion of Dezhou's borders has never stopped. Last time, they were defeated by Duke Ding and promised to pay tribute every year. Now, they've gone back on their word. Legend has it that Kan Yu Jin is a true man who keeps his promises. Who would have thought that in the end, Kan Yu Jin would let us and the people of the world see such a wonderful farce? Si Qin hung his head. His mouth was gagged and his hands were tightly bound. Even if he tried to pull out the cloth in his mouth, he couldn't use his fingers. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't open his mouth. He felt really sullen. After being escorted back to the capital for so many days, Si Qin even had the urge to seek relief at this moment. Enough, really enough. As a Khan, he had suffered enough humiliation. He was destined to die anyway. So why couldn't he reincarnate earlier? It seemed that Lu Heng was a smart person. Before he got on the bus, he had already predicted his next step. Since his life had become a burden to him, he didn't want it anymore. When the other ministers heard Li Qitian's words, they all began to criticize Si Qin. Words such as going back on one's words, being ungrateful, and being utterly heartless were all thrown into Si Qin's ears without hesitation. The continuous days of torture and the abuse of the people along the way had almost driven them crazy. Now, these ministers were buzzing in his ears like mosquitoes, trying their best to ridicule him. Why had Si Qin ever suffered such humiliation in his life? The look in his eyes became more and more resolute, as if he was already prepared to die. Li Qitian allowed the ministers to curse and humiliate him. When their voices gradually weakened, he waved his hand. When the ministers saw this, they all immediately shut their mouths. Whether it was going back on one's word, destroying the letter of surrender, or leading troops to attack Dezhou, this was part of the Taitan Khan's duty. Although the winner is king, I've always dealt with things fairly. In this matter, there is only victory and defeat for Eugene Khan. There is no right or wrong. Li Qitian's words caused the ministers to fall into deep thought. Soon after, many of the ministers nodded in agreement. They deeply approved of and admired Li Qitian's way of thinking. However, Li Qitian changed the topic and said, "However, as the emperor's son-in-law, the previous Taitan Khan of Inari, you were the head of the family. You were also the one who recognized your worth. However, you killed your wife because you wanted to seize the throne. Such ruthlessness and unscrupulous methods truly makes one's heart turn cold." There were many different opinions about Inari Khan's death, and it was very difficult to obtain an accurate answer. However, Li Qitian's words were 100% certain that Si Qin's expression would change. Sure enough, Si Qin seemed to have been poked in his sore spot. Although he was locked in a cage, he violently twisted and struggled. Bright red drops of blood slid down his wrist, down his dirty sleeve, and finally dripped to the ground. Despite this pain, Si Qin still did not give up struggling. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Li Qitian. What? Could it be that I was wrong? As the Khan of Inari, he wholeheartedly trusted you and entrusted you with all matters, big or small. But what about you? You coveted the position of Khan and even betrayed your family. You killed your wife with your own hands and framed others. You are such a despicable person. Just looking at you is enough to dirty my eyes. Woo, woo. Si Qin struggled even more fiercely. Oh, you still have something to say? Li Qitian raised his eyebrows as if he had seen something funny. He waved his hand and laughed. Go and remove the rag from his mouth. I want to hear what this Taitan Khan has to say to defend himself. Yes. Immediately, a guard stepped forward and removed the rag from Si Qin's mouth. Si Qin's mouth was dry and his throat was dry. He coughed for a while, and even his tears were on the verge of flowing out. Only then did he calm down. Li Qitian was not impatient. After waiting for a while, he heard a hoarse voice speaking in fluent Dezhou's language. You say that this Khan is despicable? Are you saying that you're not despicable? You are a fatuous ruler who conspires to murder his loyal subjects and only cares about the lives of his people? Li Qitian was furious. He suddenly regretted giving Si Qin a chance to speak. He had originally thought that Si Qin and his party were already at death's door. Who would have thought that Si Qin still had the guts to speak? Hearing Si Qin's outrageous curses, the ministers all looked askance at him. Li Qitian wished he could shut Si Qin's mouth, but he was the one who had said it, so he could not go back on his words. Si Qin saw Li Qitian's expression change and laughed loudly. What son of destiny! You are just a mediocre person who stole other people's achievements. Tian Jizi's divination once said that the position of emperor was held by the Ziwei Emperor's star. Are you the Ziwei Emperor's star? Think about what you have done all these years. What have you done for the people of your country? I see that you are like a rich man who suddenly struck it rich. You only care about your own enjoyment and don't care about the suffering of the people. You don't even want to hear a word about you, but think about it carefully. How can you compare to the Ziwei Emperor's star? Everyone knew about the legend of the Ziwei Emperor's star. They had also heard of Tianjizi's divination, but no one dared to mention it in front of Li Qitian. Today, after being exposed by Utkin, everyone started to panic. They didn't know what Li Qitian would do to ease the awkwardness. They had heard everything, so they wouldn't be silenced, right? Li Qitian was furious, but he was afraid that his ferocious expression would make him look guilty. He took 2 deep breaths to calm himself down. Treacherous villain, you are about to die, yet you are still trying to sow discord between the monarch and his subjects. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but who in the imperial court are you related to? Do you think they really trust you? Si Qin looked around, then shook his head and laughed. What a waste of resources. If my Tayton had as much land and resources as the Zhou, I am confident that Tayton would be 10 times or even 100 times more powerful than you are now. You have the most advantageous conditions, but you have made a mess of things. Go and ask the people of your country. Who was the one who used money to buy food for the disaster relief? Did they thank you? Or did they thank the people who helped the disaster relief? Shut up, shut up. Li Qitian was finally angry. He pointed a trembling finger at Si Qin and shouted, Men, skin this person alive, as you command. Seeing that the other ministers did not respond, Xiong Jinshui had no choice but to quickly walk forward and hurriedly call out to the generals in front of the hall. Hurry up, His Majesty's decree. Can't you all hear it? The great Han general and the imperial bodyguards seemed to come back to their senses. They hurriedly opened the cage and took Si Qin out. Si Qin continued to curse without fear of death. How can someone so muddle-headed and immoral be the emperor of the Zhou? I think your Zhou is going to perish. Even if you kill me, it will be useless. I will turn into a malicious spirit and watch you bring about your own destruction. Impudent. Li Qitian's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He pointed at Si Qin and shouted, There is no need to take him away. He's right here. I want to watch you all execute him. No one is allowed to leave. I want to see who will bring about their own destruction today. Execute. Execute. Even though some people stretched out Si Qin's arms and tied him up, cutting him into pieces wasn't something that everyone could do. They had to cut off a thin piece of flesh from each cut and let him experience pain that was worse than death. However, they couldn't let him die for real. Dazhou's officials watched as some people prepared torture instruments and some went to find experienced elders. Everyone's backs were covered in a layer of cold sweat. Even their calves were trembling. Dazhou's officials were already like this. The people in the prison carriage were already scared witless and trembling. Bian Ruhan opened her mouth wide. The rags in her mouth made it so that she could only whimper. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't. She wanted to live, but she knew that she wouldn't be able to live. Si Qin was going to be cut into pieces. If she could die with an intact corpse, it would be a privilege. Bian Ruhan was like an ant on a hot pan. She struggled with all her might in the cage. It wasn't just Bian Ruhan. Even the Tayton generals and Lu Heng's subordinates were scared out of their wits when they saw the scene of Si Qin being cut into pieces alive. Si Qin knew that he was going to die for sure. Even if he had to suffer the pain of being cut into pieces alive, he didn't care. When the executioner arrived, he was firmly tied to a wooden stake. He raised his head and glared at Li Qitian. Si Qin still had the courage to curse loudly. You fucking fatuous ruler. Vin Khan was never at ease when I handed the world to you. The people of your country are also people. Don't tell me that they've all silently become immortals. How much money do you have? Is it enough to feed these people? Li Qitian flew into a rage. He took a big step forward, but he restrained his impulsiveness. He only said, I have the final say. Even if you're worried about the country and its people, you have to understand that no matter what happens in the future, you won't be able to see it. Si Qin threw his head back and laughed. His laughter was so loud that Li Qitian's eardrums hurt. Si Qin's fearless eyes made Li Qitian feel an unprecedented pressure. Fortunately, Xiong Jinshui and the imperial bodyguards were loyal. They all stood in front of Li Qitian. When the first person was cut, Si Qin was in so much pain that he couldn't speak. His face seemed to be covered with frost, and his forehead was sweating profusely. Chapter 1177. This was a baptism of blood. The bluestone bricks in front of Fontaine Palace were soaked in blood. The smell of blood and a foul smell from the human abdomen filled the air, causing everyone's hair to stand on end. Some people even lowered their heads and closed their eyes, not daring to look at the scene. The pain of having one's flesh cut and bones scraped was not something a normal person could endure. Si Qin fainted many times from the pain. When he woke up, he would continue to scream, and when the pain reached its peak, he would faint again. For example, Bien Ruhan had already fainted from fright. Si Qin's subordinates were all trembling, and some of them had already peed in their pants. Seeing the people they used to get along with all day being cut and scraped to the point where only bones and internal organs were left, no one would be able to endure it and would collapse. Cut in half, Li Qitian stood on the high steps, his eyes filled with excitement after seeing blood. He pointed at the other people in the cages. Drag these rebels to the Meridian Gate. As you command. After witnessing the death of 1,000 cuts, all the palace servants, imperial bodyguards, and great Han generals were covered in cold sweat. They were all tense, and their voices were much louder than usual. Those in the cages who had not fainted from fright widened their eyes in horror when they heard the words cut in half. They wanted to open their mouths to beg for mercy, but their mouths were blocked. They could only look at Li Qitian and repeatedly nod their heads. Those who were cut in half did not die immediately. In fact, it took 4 to 6 hours for them to breathe their last. Compared to death by 1,000 cuts, being cut in half at the waist was just as painful. None of the officials dared to say anything to persuade him. At this time, everyone felt a chill run down their backs. When Li Qitian's bright eyes swept over them, their hair almost stood on end. Killing the Taitan Khan was no doubt satisfying, but everyone could feel that the Emperor's actions were also a show of strength. The cages were lifted onto the prison cart and transported to the Meridian Gate. The news of the Taitan Khan being executed by 1,000 cuts and the rest being cut in half at the waist was posted by the Yamen. The commoners spread the news from 1 to 10, 10 to 100. By noon, the space in front of the Meridian Gate was packed with onlookers. The Jingji guards split into 2 rows and passed through the 2 sides of the road, pushing the commoners behind them. They opened up the road in the middle and transported the prisoner carriages to Meridian Gate. Qin Yining frowned in the crowd. He turned around and said to the people around him, "Let's go back. Don't you want to take a look? There's nothing much to see. Let's go back." Qin Yining didn't hate those people so much that she wanted to see them being chopped in half and dying slowly. Even if they were her enemies, she couldn't bear to see them die in such a way. "You are just too kind." Jingzhe and Xiao Shui followed him on his left and right. They escorted Qin Yining, who was dressed as a teenager, out of the crowd and took a detour back to the farm. The cruelty of the torture in the capital was known by the whole nation. The most surprising thing was that the news of Si Qin's death by 1,000 cuts spread to the Taitan, but it didn't cause any ripples. Because the Taitan Khan had been captured by Dezhou, the Taitan had no leader. Moreover, Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu had joined forces to suppress any thoughts of rebellion. The imperial court began to anxiously fight for the one and only position. The Taitan imperial court is so busy fighting for the throne that no one cares about the life and death of Ujin Khan. It makes one sigh. Su Weiji held the teapot and poured tea for Qin Huaiyuan, Pang Xiao, and Ji Ziyu. He then gestured for them to drink. Everyone took a sip of tea and sighed at the same time. Ji Ziyu asked Pang Xiao, "Have you decided on a date to return to the capital?" Pang Xiao nodded. "The provisions have been prepared. We can leave at any time. Alon, what do you plan to do from now on?" Su Weiji and Qin Huaiyuan both lowered their eyes and sipped their tea. They didn't deliberately look at Ji Ziyu's expression. This was out of respect for Pang Xiao's good friend. Ji Ziyu also acted very casually in front of Pang Xiao. He smiled and said, "I've already thought about it. The Dragon Legion is currently guarding the Heaven's Gate. The Dragon Legion is familiar with this place. Furthermore, the Taitan won't be able to invade the south. There's no need to worry about this place. I plan to return to the capital with you." Jiziu's words shocked Qin Huaiyuan and Su Weiji. Pang Xiao said that he was going back to the capital, but in fact, he was going with the Tiger Army and the South Pacifying Army. It would be easy for the South Pacifying Army to go together. Feng Dazhuang was Pang Xiao's trusted aide, so he could trust him. However, the commander of the Tiger Legion, Gao Wenliang, was there. If they wanted to take the Tiger Legion away, they would have to deal with Gao Wenliang first. To put it bluntly, Pang Xiao was going to the capital to rebel against Li Qiqian. If Jiziu wanted to protect himself, staying at the border was the best choice. If he went back with Pang Xiao, he would definitely be dragged into this conflict. Qin Huaiyuan looked up at Jiziu and Pang Xiao. He knew that Jiziu and Pang Xiao were sworn brothers and were best friends. However, thinking about it, wasn't the Emperor of Heaven also a sworn brother of Pang Xiao? In the end, wouldn't he still be afraid of Pang Xiao and to try to kill him? From Jiziu's perspective, not reporting Pang Xiao was already very loyal. Now that he was going back, he was going to help Pang Xiao. This kind of action was really unexpected, and it was especially moving. Pang Xiao looked at Jiziu with some worry and disapproval in his eyes. Alan, I understand your good intentions, and I'm very grateful. However, you know very well what I'm going to do this time. Swords and knives have no eyes on the battlefield. Things in the world are unpredictable. When the time comes, who will win and who will lose, who will live and who will die, is still unknown. I hope that you can stay here and guard the border. You don't have to get involved in this mess. Seeing that Jiziu was about to refute, Pang Xiao patted his shoulder and said, I know your intentions. However, your best choice this time is to protect yourself. Although Anyang is no longer here, you are still the prince consort of the imperial family. The Empress Dowager is still here. If you go back with me, you will bear the crime of rebelling against the Yu clan and your own family. This will become a stain on your record. You are now a hero who has made outstanding military achievements and is respected by the people. Why do you want to get involved in this mess? Su Weiji and Qin Huaiyuan both agreed with Pang Xiao's words. The two of them nodded and said, Duke Ding, you really don't have to take the risk. Jiziu, however, smiled freely and said, What Duke Ding? What outstanding military achievements and the people's respect? I've never cared about these things. Now, we are only one step away from the country's prosperity and the people's peace. We are only one step away from our goal when we started the rebellion. Why should I shrink back? Pang Xiao's heart trembled. When they started the rebellion and rebelled against the northern Ji country, they only had one goal. That was to prevent the people from being oppressed and exploited by the imperial court. They wanted to let the people live a stable life. At that time, the northern Ji emperor couldn't do it, so they started the rebellion. Now, the emperor couldn't do it either, so they had to continue. Pang Xiao and Jiziu were the same kind of people. For more than 10 years, their original intention hadn't changed. Neither of them was blinded by fame and fortune, nor did they change their direction. Among the three brothers, the only one who changed was the one who sat in that position. Jiziu patted Pang Xiao's shoulder and laughed heartily. What are you afraid of? We have only come this far. It's time to take the next step. Just do what we want. Pang Xiao finally couldn't stop Jiziu and nodded. Qin Huaiyuan and Su Weiji were also very moved. Jiziu was a man of few words. They didn't expect that at this critical moment, not only would he stand up for Pang Xiao, but he would also say such words. It seemed that his reticence was only reserved for unrelated outsiders, but for those he regarded as his own brothers, he would never be cold to them again. Good. Pang Xiao nodded confidently. Since that's the case, let's prepare to set off. Jiziu heard this and nodded with a smile. At the same time, Li Qiqian, who had taken care of the Taitan Khan and the rebels, was finally in a better mood. He ordered people to continue arresting people suspected of being the previous dynasty's Prince Zhou and expanded the scope of the search to the surrounding towns. This kind of search exhausted Shuntian Prefecture and the Jingji guards. They searched twice in a row, but didn't find anyone. By the third search, everyone was too lazy to look carefully. There were so many people left and right. Everyone was on the list, and no one was suspicious. How could they just casually arrest someone? Even if they could find a youth of similar age, they still had to find the previous dynasty's imperial jade seal. Otherwise, with the emperor's temper, they would definitely be severely punished. After avenging the previous disgrace and killing the rebels, the capital once again fell into a state of panic. Some commoners didn't even dare to leave their homes. They only came out when there was nothing to eat at home. It wasn't just the commoners. Even the high-ranking officials and nobles, after the bloody scene in front of Fengtian Palace, had a great change in their understanding of the emperor. No one dared to provoke him at this time. Even the families of the imperial court officials kept a low profile. The entire capital was shrouded in a layer of dark clouds. Li Qiqian couldn't find the previous dynasty's prince, so he pointed the finger at Pang Xiao. He mobilized 3,000 troops and arranged for Song Deqiu and Lei Guaning, 2 trusted aides, to be imperial envoys. They went directly to the border to announce the imperial edict. Prince Zhongshuan, who had committed 11 serious crimes, was escorted back to the capital. He also announced Pang Xiao's crimes to the world. This time, Li Qiqian's words were sincere. He wrote the tone of a sworn brother and a conscientious ruler. After many commoners read it, they doubted their previous judgment. Could it be that the emperor was really wrongly accused? Prince Zhongshuan was really plotting something, and the emperor was always tolerating it? Could it be that we misunderstood the emperor? How do those high-ranking officials and nobles of the imperial court live? What kind of gratitude and grudges exist between them? It's not something that we commoners can see or hear. What we see might be an illusion. Who can say for sure what the real situation is? There were many commoners who had such doubts. Li Qiqian's method caused many commoners to doubt Pang Xiao. It was at this time that the previous dynasty's Prince Zhou Lian's proclamation spread throughout the streets and alleys of the capital overnight. It detailed everything that Li Qiqian had done over the past few years, including the 2 disaster relief missions, as well as everything that Pang Xiao had sacrificed for him during his expeditions. With such a strong contrast, anyone with a brain would know who was black and who was white. Before Li Qiqian could get angry enough from this declaration of war, news came from the northern border. Chapter 1178. Returning to court? Who gave him the guts? Zhan's imperial envoy hasn't arrived yet and hasn't given him a decree. He actually dares to come back like this. Li Qiqian was shocked and angry. He paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. Only the sound of his footsteps and heavy breathing could be heard in the imperial study. After a while, Li Qiqian immediately issued a decree. Northern cities, use all your strength to intercept Pang Xiao's group. Whoever can capture Pang Xiao alive, Zhan will grant that person the title of Duke, hereditary. One had to know that for hundreds of years, there had been a rule in Beiji that all titles of nobility were nobility. That was to say, the title of nobility was inferior and hereditary. There were very few hereditary titles. Now that the Son of Heaven was willing to open his golden mouth, it was clear how much he feared Prince Zhongshuan returning to court. Pang Xiao had outstanding military achievements. Now that he and Jiziyu had defeated the Tatan together, his status in the hearts of the people had already risen to another level. Even though Li Qiqian tried to slander and obstruct him, the prince of the previous dynasty had repeatedly opposed him. Every time, it was with great momentum and was impossible to guard against. This made all of Li Qiqian's actions serve as a foil, which made Pang Xiao's image even greater. Li Qiqian was well aware of this point, which was why he was so worried and urgently needed to control Pang Xiao. However, man proposes, God disposes. Unexpectedly, things had turned out like this. The person who delivered the decree quickly headed to the northern cities. Li Qiqian anxiously waited for news. In the imperial harem, which concubine and concubine did not hope for the Son of Heaven's personal arrival. However, ever since the Tatan War broke out, the Son of Heaven had not stepped into the imperial harem for several months. The concubines and concubines had nowhere to vent their worries, so they all tried to find out Li Qiqian's itinerary openly or secretly, hoping to meet him by chance. However, they did not have the opportunity. Today, several concubines and concubines were gathered in Qingquan Palace and were discussing this matter with the empress. Sun Mama, who served the empress, quickly walked in from outside and whispered a few words into the empress's ear with a grave expression. When the empress heard that Prince Zhongshuan is returning to court, perhaps he will encounter the imperial envoys sent by the Son of Heaven along the way, her eyes could not help but widen. The color of blood immediately receded from her proud face. The concubines examined the empress's expression and knew that something major must have happened. Otherwise, this person who handled matters so calmly would not have such an expression. Nyang Nyang, is something troubling you? If you tell us, we can help you share your worries. Yes, Your Highness. Is something the matter? The empress's heart was thumping, but there were some things that could not be said casually. The harem was not allowed to interfere with politics. Moreover, she knew her husband's personality too well. Even if his skills were not as good as others, he would not allow anyone to say anything wrong. If she said anything here and these people in front of her spread it to the emperor's ears, wouldn't it become her fault? The empress brushed it off, saying that she was tired, and dismissed everyone. After everyone left, Sun Mama moved closer to the empress and said in a low voice, Nyang Nyang, what do you think should be done? Your Majesty arranged for someone to deliver the edict, but before the edict arrived, Prince Zhongshuan dares to return to court. This is clearly a sign that something is not right. The empress nodded and asked, Where is Hao Ji? Sun Mama said, His Highness is studying with his master. Does Your Highness want to summon him? No, let him study well. It's just that these days... She moved closer to Sun Mama's ear and also lowered her voice. Prepare Hao Ji-er's clothes. If the situation is not right, immediately send the child out. Nyang Nyang you. Sun Mama turned pale with fright. The empress's eyes were red and filled with tears. This is something that can't be helped. Although being a prince is precious, if things go wrong, I'm afraid that being a prince will become Hao Ji-er's death symbol. He's only 5 years old. What does he know? Why should he be dragged down by others? This empress has lived for so many years. It's enough. I only have Hao Ji in my life. Even if I have to risk universal condemnation, I must let Hao Ji live. Sun Mama's nose turned sour and tears fell down. Nyang Nyang, it's not necessary. It's not necessary to be like this. You are the mother of the country, and His Little Highness is Your Majesty's only son. No matter what, it's not necessary. It's because of this that we have to prepare for both sides. The empress held back her tears and whispered, I don't expect Hao Ji to be a famous ruler. I only hope that he can be an ordinary and healthy child. He can live every day happily and peacefully until he's old. This way, the child's journey in this world will not be in vain. The empress stood up, and her body couldn't help but sway. Sun Mama hurriedly supported her. Nyang Nyang, this servant understands your meaning. But if something really happens, His Highness can't go alone. This servant will think of a way to arrange everything. If it doesn't work, you can take His Highness with you. Me? The empress smiled self-deprecatingly. She didn't pretend to be the empress anymore. She just shook her head and said, I can't go. Just like when the emperor dealt with Pang Shao, he didn't even let the Qin clan go. Think about it. Anyone who opposes the emperor when it really comes to that point, won't they not let me go? Sun Mama was speechless for a moment and couldn't find the words to explain. The empress sighed, I know your intentions and your loyalty. We are master and servant. For so many years, I've always treated you as my family. Now the situation is urgent. Your Majesty and Prince Zhongshuan must fight. In the end, it's unknown who will live to the end. I just want to ask you, when there is no other choice, immediately take Hao Ji away and live an ordinary life outside. At that time, he is no longer a prince, no longer Li Hao. He is just a child of an ordinary family, and you are his grandmother. I will prepare money and a house for you. I just want you to raise Hao Ji as your grandson and let it be a proper person. At this point, the empress choked with sobs. Granny's son almost started sobbing. The master and servant looked at each other and cried, but because of the rules of the palace, they had to restrain their tears. As a woman, why is it so difficult? I don't see much good fortune. Even as the Empress, this servant has never seen you truly happy. But when it comes to danger, you have to be dragged down. Why bother? The Empress smiled bitterly. This is fate. Aren't all women like this? The Empress couldn't help but think of the bits and pieces of Pang Xiao and Qin Yining's time together. When she thought of the experience at Wanfo Temple that day, she still felt a little sweet and a little bitter. Qin Yining was in the same situation as her. They were bound together for good or ill. He had also been dragged down by Pang Xiao several times. But Qin Yining had Pang Xiao's sincere love and care. Even if she died for such a man, she should be willing, right? What about her? Her husband was no longer the same person. He had no patience for her, no love, and even no affection for her. The reason why she was still sitting on the Empress's seat was because the Emperor wanted to show his loyalty, so he didn't let his wife go. She was cautious and didn't expect any love. She just wanted her son to grow up safely. But now it seemed that a storm was coming. Her husband couldn't even give her this. She had to be prepared to be buried with him. Was it fair? Where was the fairness in this world? Percent Lei Guaning and Song Dichio were ordered to lead 3,000 battalions to the north to announce the imperial edict. Not long after they set out, they heard that Your Majesty had ordered the officials in the north to capture Pang Xiao and that there would be a great reward. The scouts they sent out found out that Pang Xiao had already led troops in the direction of the capital before they could issue the imperial edict to capture him. Lei Guaning and Song Dichio panicked. Prince Zhongshuan and Duke Dinghua came together with at least 300,000 soldiers and horses. We said that we brought 3,000 battalions, but we have more than 1,000 people in total. How can we capture Prince Zhongshuan? Capture? I knew we couldn't capture him from the beginning. Song Dachio shook his head. This matter is really not easy to handle. We can't win in martial arts, so it's impossible to capture him. But if we don't go, we'll be defying the imperial edict. But if we go, I'm afraid we won't be able to keep our lives. The two ordered the 1,000 or so soldiers to stay where they were and were not in a hurry to move forward. At this time, the further they went forward, the closer they were to Pang Xiao. They all felt fear in their hearts. And Pang Xiao had indeed heard that Li Qitian had ordered the officials in the north to capture him, and that there would be a great reward. He originally thought that he would have to go through a lot of trouble just to pass by a city. He didn't expect that the first city they passed by after leaving the 4 passes at the border would have the city gates open wide and let them pass before they could even make a move. Wang Yi is our savior. If it weren't for Wang Yi, would we still be able to return to our hometown to farm? Wang Yi and Duke Dinghua repelled the Tatars. No Tatars will be able to charge in from now on. We will never forget Wang Ye's great kindness for the rest of our lives. We just open the gates and let you pass by. How much trouble can it be? Pang Xiao's army's journey was extremely smooth. The places he led the troops to were all the same as when they chased the Tatan out. It was the same as going back the same way they came. Although the emperor's decree was posted on the notice board, the people all saw it. The mountain was high and the emperor was far away, so they acted like they didn't know and directly opened the gates to let them pass. There were even people who stuffed food and clothes into the hands of the Tiger Army and the Southern Peace Army. Such a smooth and unobstructed scene was truly surprising. When Li Qitian heard the news, he was so angry that his eyes turned red. He immediately flew into a rage during the court assembly. These people are neglecting their duties. They didn't even stop the enemy from invading. Instead, they opened the gates for them. What kind of logic is this? While eating my salary, I even raised an outsider. The officials in the court assembly didn't dare to say much. What do they do now? The enemy had the advantage in numbers. In order to fight the Tatars, the emperor sent all the troops that could go to the northern frontier. Only the Jingji Guard and the 3,000 battalion were left in the capital. The scary thing about Pang Xiao was that he had too much prestige in the army. Li Qitian was even worried that Pang Xiao would have a smooth journey in the remaining territories. When he reached the capital, would he bring people to attack? If he really attacked, how would they be able to stop him? Seeing that everyone was silent, Li Qitian became more and more irritable. He didn't know when he would be unable to bear it and go crazy. When Pang Xiao returned with his troops, he definitely wouldn't let him off easily. How could he fight against him? Chapter 1179. Li Qitian angrily glared. It's Zhou Yin again. It's that Zhou Yin again. Our Shantian prefecture and the Jingji guard, all useless. The capital is only so big, but you can't even catch a young man. You just can't catch him. All the officials bowed and said in unison, Your Majesty, please calm down. Cliché. Every time something happens, you just ask me to calm down. Li Qitian's chest violently heaved up and down. He couldn't breathe, but he couldn't swallow it either, causing his face to turn purple. When the officials heard Li Qitian's angry roar, they could already feel the emperor's anger. They were so scared that they all knelt down and saluted, not daring to say anything. Xiong Jinshui, who was serving beside Li Qitian, was so scared that he almost fainted when he saw the emperor's expression. If something really happened to the emperor, would they, his personal servants, still have a way out? Xiong Jinshui secretly prayed in his heart that nothing would make the emperor angry again. But things didn't go as he wished. Soon, someone used Zhou Lian's declaration of war. Li Qitian only took a glance at it before he crumpled the document into pieces. Bastard, bastard. A bunch of rebels, fanatics. This declaration of war was written without any standard. It was written in plain language, and it was obvious that it strived to be understood by all the people. Once again, it exaggerated Pang Xiao's achievements and benevolence. Your Majesty was just a nouveau riche. After becoming the emperor, he did everything for himself and didn't care about the lives of the people. At the end of the declaration of war, he even dared to openly say, Can such an incapable ruler really bring happiness to the people of the Zhou? It's better to restore the Beiji dynasty, establish a wise ruler, and stabilize the world. That's the right path. This Zhou Yin is really shameless. How did the Northern Ji dynasty get overthrown? How could he forget? Restoring the Beiji dynasty will make the people live better than under my rule? You're really spouting nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about. However, Li Qitian's anger couldn't stop Pang Xiao and his troops from returning to the capital. It was August, but the hot weather couldn't stop Li Qitian's thoughts. Your Majesty, Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu command an army of 300,000 soldiers. The city gates they pass through are wide open, and they have successfully incorporated 3,000 battalions. They're only 3 or 4 days away from the capital. Li Qitian was angry and anxious. He was so angry that his heart ached. He clutched his chest and asked, How many troops can the Ministry of War send to defend the city? What about the Ministry of Revenue? Is there enough food and provisions? The Minister of War, Wang Ji, stepped forward and said with a heavy expression, Your Majesty, because of the danger of the battle with the Tatan, the troops near the capital and around the capital were all under Pang Xiao's command. Now, there are only the Jingji Guard and the 5 cities warden's office in the capital. Compared to the 300,000 troops that Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu brought back, it's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The Assistant Minister of Revenue, Fang Shu, also said, Your Majesty, the national treasury is empty. Even the officials in the imperial court have owed their salaries for more than a year. The taxes of the people have been increased to 80%. The people who were suppressed by the prefectures are now dissatisfied again. They're complaining that the imperial court is heartless. Li Qitian gritted his teeth. His face alternated between green and white. The imperial mausoleum wasn't built. The treasure wasn't found. There was no money and no people. Even the unruly people were against him. How could he fight this war? You mean there's nothing we can do? Your Majesty, this subject is ignorant. At this time, there's really nothing we can do. That's exactly the case. Your Majesty, this subject has already racked our brains and done our best. However, this subject can't conjure up money, nor can we conjure up troops. Li Qitian sneered when he heard this. Don't tell me you wanted to stretch out my neck and be executed. He endured the stifling feeling in his chest and said in a hoarse voice, Don't think that you'll have an easy time just because Pang Xiao brought people in. A new emperor brings in new officials. Don't tell me you want to stay out of this? These words caused the hearts and minds of everyone present to tremble violently. They really didn't have the confidence to stay out of this. Li Qiqian said again, "No money? Yes, our treasury is empty, and the Ministry of Revenue also doesn't have money. However, we owe you a year's salary. I don't see the officials in the imperial court starving to the point of not being able to eat. Do you think we don't know how many taxes you've evaded and how many benefits you've received from your family? Now that the country is facing a crisis, our treasury has been emptied. Don't tell me you still don't want to express your gratitude?" The officials looked at each other in dismay. The emperor must have been so anxious that he actually stretched out his hand to the officials. No one was willing to pay out of their own pockets. Firstly, they didn't want to bleed. Secondly, they didn't want to expose their family's wealth. Thirdly, and most importantly, everyone more or less felt lucky. They felt that Prince Zhongshuan wasn't a person who would willfully kill the innocent. Moreover, if he really wanted to fight for the position, it would be difficult for him to walk the path of a wise emperor. At that time, wouldn't he become a tyrant again? Prince Zhongshuan wasn't that stupid. However, these thoughts could only be thought in everyone's mind. If we can negotiate peacefully, perhaps this crisis can be resolved. An official suggested. This subject agrees. Your Majesty, this subject thinks that we might as well start from two sides. On the one hand, order people to secretly contact Duke Ding. After all, Duke Ding and Your Majesty are in-laws. Moreover, Princess Royal of Anyang died at the hands of the Qin clan. If we instigate them, it will definitely succeed. If Duke Ding can assassinate Pang Xiao, this matter can be resolved. If he can't, even if Duke Ding changes his mind, it will still be a great help to Your Majesty. On the other hand, we also have to make two preparations. If we can't pull Duke Ding back to the camp of the imperial court, then we have to find a way to negotiate peacefully. Li Qiqian frowned and sneered. Negotiate peacefully? Do you want me to beg them for mercy? Your Majesty, where there is life, there is hope. Only by keeping your life can you keep the fire for the future. Failure. It was really a failure. How could he let himself fall into such a situation? As the emperor, he was already the master of the world and was respected by all people. Now, he had fallen to the point where he had to negotiate peacefully with traitors. He was the emperor. Why should he suffer such humiliation? Li Qiqian pointed at the people in front of him and sneered. Is this your way of being loyal to the emperor and patriotism? You don't want to pay money and don't want to touch your family's foundation. So you want me to beg the traitors for mercy? If news of this were spread, how am I supposed to face the world? Your Majesty, a real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. You are the emperor of a country. You must not lose the big for the small. What a good way to yield and when to stand tall. Li Qiqian sneered and immediately ordered the general to tie up the official who spoke. Hand him over to the Ministry of Personnel for a strict investigation. Find out how much of Lord Sun's family property is, how much of it is ancestral property, and how much of it is from bribery. I'd like to see how you can yield and stand tall. The guards and the general in front of the hall immediately walked into the hall and dragged the official away. Your Majesty, you can't do this. I'm innocent. Your Majesty, please calm down. Your Majesty's action is inappropriate. Who has an objection? Tie them all up. Li Qiqian roared, scaring the officials into silence. That day, a list of Lord Sun's family property was given to Li Qiqian, along with the evidence of his many years of bribery and collusion. The next day, the order to search Lord Sun's family was issued, filling the national treasury. As a result, the court became even more jittery. Even the officials who had ideas didn't dare to speak in front of the emperor, lest they invite a fatal disaster. Princess Consort, I've already made some inquiries. The search in the city has gradually loosened in recent days. First, there hasn't been any progress in the investigation. Moreover, the salary of the imperial court isn't enough, so the city guards are slacking off. Second, corrupt officials are being arrested everywhere in the city. The soldiers and generals are all racking their brains to follow suit and search Lord Sun's family for profit. Third, the weather is too hot. In short, It's good that we take this opportunity to leave. Xiaoyu smiled and said, when the time comes, we'll disguise ourselves. Nothing will go wrong. Qin Yining nodded and said with a smile, teacher is right. Fortunately, we're in the outer city, so it'll be easier for us to leave. However, we still need to carry the two children separately. After all, it was a bit conspicuous to have a boy and a girl together. Xiaoyu said, don't worry, I'll arrange it. Wang Ye's group should be arriving in the capital soon. If we head north, we'll definitely meet up with Wang Yi. That's right. Qin Yining sighed softly, his eyes full of hope. I can't wait any longer. It's inconvenient to communicate these days, and Wang Ye's group is constantly on the move. It's even more inconvenient to exchange information. I wonder how they're doing. Xiaoyu laughed and said, even so, you and Wang Yi still have a tacit understanding. Once you arrange for the declaration of war, Wang Ye's group will know to return to the capital. Along the way, the army will open the gates of all the cities and towns along the way. They won't lose a single soldier, and their reputation is even better than before. Wang Ye's benevolence and righteousness, coupled with your efforts to create momentum, Wang Ye's voice is even louder than before. Qin Yining said, it's all thanks to the person above who's willing to put an effort to set him off. These days, Li Qitian was forced into a corner, and the things he did were very stupid. Perhaps Li Qitian had resentment in his heart, and he finally found an outlet to vent his anger. However, in Qin Yining's opinion, his actions were tantamount to destroying the Great Wall and causing the emperor and his subjects to be at odds with each other. When he needed manpower the most, he was pushing people away from him one by one. Perhaps this was where Tian Jizi's brilliance lay. Although she had died, he had already planned out everything that happened afterwards. Wang Fei. Jian walked in quickly. Master Zhong just sent a message. The supplies and food donated by Tong number have already been sent to Wang Ye's army, along with the supplies prepared by Master Zhong. Xiaoyu stroked his beard and smiled. This boss Qiu is also an interesting person. These days, Qiu Feishan had been doing her best to win back Mu Jinghu's heart. Although Qin Yining knew that she donated these for the long-term development of the Qiu family in the future, she had indeed succeeded in softening Mu Jinghu's heart. After all, Mu Jinghu had feelings for Qiu Feishan. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before the two reconciled. This was also something that Qin Yining was happy to see. After all, they were friends. Qin Yining didn't want Mu Jinghu's life to be unhappy because of her and Pang Xiao. Master, there are a few people outside, and they want to stay at our farmstead for the night. Someone from the outer courtyard came in to pass on the message. Qin Yining was stunned. Our farmstead is so remote. There are people who want to stay at our farmstead. Chapter 1180. Qin Yining felt more and more strange. If their farm was located in some remote mountain forest, it would be reasonable for passers-by to say that they had nowhere to go. But although this place was remote, it was outside the capital city. Not to mention anything else, if they wanted to stay in a hotel, they could find a place to stay. What kind of people came? Looking at the outer courtyard head worker who didn't know how to describe it, Qin Yining stood up. I'll go take a look myself. Xiaoyu said, that's not right. If someone deliberately framed us, wouldn't it be dangerous? This old one should go take a look. Qin Yining felt that it was reasonable, so he nodded in agreement. Who would have thought that after a while, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside, followed by Xiaoyu's excited and cheerful voice. Wang Fei, look who's here. Qin Yining stood up, puzzled. Ji Yun and Bing Tang looked at each other, then followed Qin Yining outside. Qin Yining had just stepped out of the door when she heard two children's voices. Mother! Mother! Two children wearing coarse clothes rushed over in the blink of an eye and hugged Qin Yining's legs. The child on the left had a small red mole between his eyebrows, while the child on the right had two dimples on his cheeks when he smiled. Qin Yining was simply stunned. She bent down and touched the two children's cheeks in disbelief. She wasn't dreaming, right? Zhao Ge. Han Ge. Mother hug. Han Ge twisted his small body. Zhao Ge didn't speak, He just blinked and looked seriously at Qin Yining. Qin Yining burst into tears. She crouched down and hugged the two children in her arms, sobbing loudly. She had no choice but to be separated from the children. She and Pang Xiao had narrowly escaped death outside. She even felt many times that she might die at any time and might not have a chance to see her children again. Sometimes, she wondered if the children would feel unfamiliar when they saw their mother again. Would they not recognize her? Perhaps they recognized her, but because she was not a competent mother and did not accompany them as they grew up, would they hate her for being irresponsible? Qin Yining felt guilty. Therefore, in all the scenes that Qin Yining had imagined for their reunion, he had never included such a scene. When Qin Yining started crying, the two children started crying as well. Brother Zhao and Brother Han used their small hands to help Qin Yining wipe his face. Bing Tang and Ji Yin were also moved and started crying. When Xie saw this, she smiled and said, "Please forgive her. Princess Consort has been thinking about the two young masters day and night. She is so excited that she can't control herself." Hearing this, Qin Yining looked up and saw a bright and beautiful smiling face through her tears. And Chao Yuqing was wearing a dress made of coarse cloth, and her hair was wrapped in a cloth. Even though she was dressed like a village woman, and her face was smeared with soot, it was still difficult to conceal the beauty that came from her bones. "Sister Yi, how have you been these years?" Qin Yining was overjoyed. He stood up and held Brother Zhao and Brother Han's hands as he walked in front of Chao Yuqing. His tears fell before he spoke. Thinking of everything that she had experienced outside after they had parted ways, and how she had almost died several times. Now that she saw her maternal family, she finally had someone to talk to. She couldn't help but cry. Chao Yuqing knew the difficulties that Qin Yining and Pang Xiao had faced. Even though Qin Yining only reported the good news and not the bad, she had listened to Qin Huaiyuan's orders and brought the children here. She had heard many rumors along the way. Even now, there were people saying that last winter, the Prince Zhongshuan's consort and a pair of swaddling twins had been captured by the emperor. The Wang consort had been locked in a cage and paraded through the streets. She had received the same treatment as the Taitan Khan, who had just been executed by 1,000 cuts. At that time, Chao Yuqing was so angry that she almost wanted to rush into the imperial city and kill that incapable ruler. Now that she saw Qin Yining crying like this, Chao Yuqing also felt sad and shed tears. Qin Yining was Qin Huaiyuan's only bloodline. Chao Yuqing loved her because she loved her. In addition, she had always admired Qin Yining's intelligence and decisiveness. Now that she had suffered so much and was even forced to separate from the children, she felt even more distressed. Okay, it's all in the past. Chao Yuqing hugged Qin Yining and patted her back. "Look, if you cry again, Brother Zhao and Brother Han will become a joke." Qin Yining sniffled and lowered her head to look at the children, who were also sobbing. Tears came out again, but she couldn't help but smile. She squatted down to wipe the tears of the two children. Brother Zhao and Brother Han have both grown a lot taller. Brother Zhao said seriously, "Mother, you've grown a lot taller too." Brother Han also copied his older brother and nodded with a smile. "Mother has also grown a lot taller." The children's childish words made Qin Yining finally smile through her tears. She hugged them and kissed their cheeks a few times. "Good children, I missed you so much." Brother Han hugged Qin Yining's neck and acted spoiled. "Mother, we missed you too. Grandmother, great-grandmother, great-grandmother, we all missed you too." Grandfather said that Mother needs our protection right now, so he had Aunt Chao bring us to find you. "Yes." Brother Zhao nodded seriously. Grandfather also said that he will bring people to meet you outside and take you to Father's military camp. Qin Yining looked at Chao Yuqing excitedly. "You guys came from Wang Ye's place?" Chao Yuqing nodded with a smile. That day, the prince and the Tatars had a decisive battle at the border. Your father felt that this might be a major event in the future, so he selected 1,000 elite soldiers. They carried the banner and successfully rushed to the battlefield from Shiyu using the tracking goo. We were in a hurry to come out, so we didn't know the situation of the battlefield. We were afraid that Brother Han and Brother Zhao would be in danger if they followed us, so we let the spies take them and follow behind. When everything was stable, we sent a letter to them. She lowered her head and rubbed Brother Zhao and Brother Han's heads. Now, our brothers are people who have seen the world. They've seen deserts, battlefields, and even military camps that stretch as far as the sea. Father's sword dance, swish, 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 it's amazing. When Brother Han mentioned the Pang Shao, he was like a little monkey. He even imitated it a few times and learned it quite well. Chao Yuqing smiled. When I'm free, I teach them some martial arts. But most of the time, they're with your father. Qin Yining was very happy. He hugged the children and kissed them again and again, then said gratefully, "These two children, it's all thanks to you. As a mother, I failed in my duty. I didn't teach them well, and I didn't accompany them well. What are you saying? How can we not know your difficulties? Brother Zhao and Brother Han also understand. Mother, I know that you and father are fighting outside to protect us." Brother Zhao took out a small handkerchief from his pocket and wiped Qin Yining's face seriously. Brother Han also rushed to say, "Yes, father said that he'll teach me sword skills. After I learn sword skills from father, I'll learn whip skills from Uncle Ji and sword skills from Uncle Mu. At that time, I'll be able to protect mother. Mother, I'll learn too," Brother Zhao also said. Qin Yining nodded repeatedly, his tears flowing nonstop. He didn't know if there was a connection between mother and son, but the sound of a child crying came from the side room. In the blink of an eye, it became a duet. Chao Yuqing then remembered and said in surprise, "Is it Brother Xian and Sister Yin?" Qin Yining nodded. "Maybe they've woken up." Brother Zhao's eyes sparkled. "Mother, we want to see little brother and little sister." "Mother, grandfather said that little brother and little sister were born by mother to accompany us. We want to go play with little brother and little sister." Qin Yining's eyes were full of tears, but he nodded and said, "Okay, let's go now." She was now really grateful to Qin Huaiyuan. Her father took care of Xia so well and also taught her children so well. He even knew about her worries. She couldn't accompany Brother Zhao and Brother Han, but she left Brother Xian and Sister Yin outside. She was also worried that if the two children found out about this, they would especially mind and feel that they were abandoned. What would she do? But now, listening to the children's tone, Qin Huaiyuan had even thought of this for her. He had already persuaded the two children so that they could accept their younger brother and sister without any ill feelings. The whole family happily went to the side room. The wet nurse coaxed the two children and suddenly saw Qin Yining bring in two delicate children. Because she didn't recognize them, she felt a little strange. She hurriedly carried the young miss and young master, who were less than 1 year old, and bowed. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. These are my other two children. They're their older brothers." Brother Zhao and Brother Han held hands and curiously walked to the two wet nurses. The wet nurse hurriedly put Brother Xian and Sister Yin on the warm Kong by the window. The two children could already sit up and crawl on their own. One was wearing a bright red little coat, and the other was wearing a pink little coat. They were both fair and beautiful, and when they smiled, they had small dimples. Seeing their grinning faces, Han Gu pulled Zhao closer and poked Yun Jie's face out of curiosity. "Brother, they are so ugly. They don't have teeth yet. In the future, when they have teeth, they won't be ugly. They don't look like you either. They're also different from me. They're not twins. Of course, they look different from us." As they spoke, the two children used their hands and feet to climb on the warm Kong. They curiously watched how the other two climbed upside down. A small warm Kong, two pairs of twins, for children, all of them were her treasures. Qin Yining wiped the corners of his eyes with a soaked handkerchief and said to Chao Yuqing beside him, "Aunt Chao, you don't know how many times I have dreamed of this scene. When I woke up, I cried until half my pillow was wet. These years, it has really been hard on you." Chao Yuqing hugged Qin Yining's shoulder and patted it. Then she smiled and said, "Fortunately, everything is improving. I heard from your father that this time, we can get it done once and for all." Wang Yi has also made up his mind. Chapter 1181. Chao Yuqing saw that the maidservants and wet nurse were taking good care of the 4 children, and that some words were not suitable for the children to hear. So she walked slowly to the corridor with Qin Yining, hand in hand. If it were up to me, in the early years, if you and Wang Yi had the same heart as you do now, you wouldn't have had to suffer so much these years. It's a pity that you are both people who care about morality and can't bear to let the common people suffer. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and lowered his eyes. He scratched the pillar beside him with his fingernails and said helplessly, "There's nothing we can do about it. Perhaps this is how a person's personality determines their fate. Sometimes I think that if I had known that today's situation would occur, perhaps I would have persuaded Wang Yi earlier. We didn't choose to do this at the most advantageous time. Sometimes I also say this to your father." Chao Yuqing put an arm around Qin Yining's shoulder. "Your father said that everything must first be accumulated before it can achieve a qualitative change. You and Wang Yi are both people who care about the common people. It's normal that you care about the common people's feelings. There are certain benefits to this." Qin Yining looked at Chao Yuqing in confusion. Chao Yuqing tucked a loose strand of hair behind Qin Yining's ear and said gently, "When things develop to the point where you can no longer bear it, you will definitely be on the side of morality and morality. At that time, no matter how things develop in the future, and whether or not you have a lofty heart, things will be easier to deal with. At least there will be fewer obstacles for you to make a choice." Qin Yining nodded. "This is the only thing that is worth comforting right now. However, will we really be allowed to make a choice in the future?" Chao Yuqing looked at Qin Yining strangely. "Do you have any other ideas?" Qin Yining turned to look inside the room. Chao Yuqing immediately understood what he meant. She held his arm and said, "Let's walk around the manor." "Okay." The two left the inner residence. Qin Yining waved his hand to indicate that there was no need for the people around him to follow. They walked along a shady path and circled around to a more open area. Chao Yuqing leaned against a tall catalpa tree and casually looked around. Then she looked up at the tassels hanging from the wide leaves. "Sister E, what do you want to say to me?" Qin Yining knew that he could speak without worry. He said, "Aunt Chao, I've never mentioned this to anyone else. I can only tell you about it." Chao Yuqing smiled happily as Qin Yining treated her as someone she could confide in. She nodded and said, "Don't worry. I won't tell anyone. If you have any troubles, you can tell me so that I can help you solve them." Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said, "Aunt Chao, in fact, my father is right. Wang Yi has a lot of support among the people, and there are many positive comments about him. In the future, there will definitely be a battle between him and Li Qitian. With Li Qitian's current financial resources and military strength, Wang Yi has a very high chance of winning." "That's right." Chao Yuqing smiled and said, "Your father always said that the two of you are very thoughtful and have everything planned out. In the future, there won't be too many obstacles." Although her words were hidden, Qin Yining understood that when Chao Yuqing said there wouldn't be too many obstacles, she was obviously talking about ascending to that position. "In fact, right now, what I want most is to live a peaceful life with my family together. It would be good if we could grow old peacefully." Chao Yuqing was stunned and said in surprise, "Sister E, you seem to be interested in that position." Qin Yining lowered her head and pursed her bright red lips. She sighed and said, "That position is good, but a person who would change by 30% will also change by 70% when they reach that position. I can't say that people will never change, but once they reach that position, change will be catalyzed. I'm really a little scared." Chao Yuqing understood. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao had a very good relationship. They had gone through too many trials and tribulations together. Qin Yining had sacrificed a lot in this relationship. Because she was involved in Pang Xiao's life, the grievances and tribulations she had suffered were unimaginable. Pang Xiao could give Qin Yining glory and wealth, but she would never be able to live a stable life. The only thing that a woman like Qin Yining cared about was that Pang Xiao was different from the men of this era. He was devoted to Qin Yining and never had any other thoughts. He did not take in concubines or mistresses. But once she reached that position, it was hard to say what would happen in the future. Once a man woke up and held the power of the world, It was hard to guarantee that he would not look forward to getting drunk and lying on the lap of a beauty. And how many years could a woman have in her prime? Qin Yining was beautiful, but she would eventually grow old. There would always be young, flower-like women who would appear to enrich the emperor's harem. Qin Yining was not afraid of a turbulent life. She was afraid that people would change easily. That would make her doubt whether her sacrifice was worth it. Chao Yuqing held Qin Yining's shoulders tenderly and sighed helplessly. Sister Yi, I understand your worries, but some things are already set in stone and cannot be changed. Just like me, I'm only a concubine. I know, Aunt Chao. I understand. Now that the world is like this, and if he really becomes the emperor, even if he doesn't like them, many women will appear by his side because of the balance of interest between the court officials. I understand all of this. I just feel a little disappointed. Don't think too much. No matter what, no one can replace your position. After all, you are the mother of 4 children. I understand. Qin Yining leaned against the trunk of the catalpa tree behind her and sighed softly. I just feel a little scared. Your relationship with Wang Yi is so good. If something really happens, it will be a pity. Chao Yuqing pondered for a moment, and her eyes lit up. Actually, with the current situation, as long as you shake your head, you can continue to live a peaceful life. Who said that one must rule the world after conquering it? Qin Yining shook her head and said, Now, it is impossible to stop halfway. Chao Yuqing fell silent. If it wasn't impossible to stop halfway, they wouldn't have had to avoid Pang Zhao's subordinates when saying this. Which of these people who followed Pang Zhao weren't doing it for their own future? Even if Pang Zhao didn't want to ascend to that position in the future, these people would think of ways to push him up. Because only when Pang Zhao became the emperor, they would have the merit of succeeding the emperor. A person shouldering the expectations and future of so many people. How could they say no just because they wanted to? Not to mention other things. If they couldn't obtain the supreme power, no matter who ascended to that position, they wouldn't let go of a person with such high prestige in the military, right? They all understood that they couldn't allow a second Li Qiqian to exist. Chao Yuqing pulled Qin Yining's hand and shook it. Sister Yi, listen to Aunt. Aunt Chao, please speak. Qin Yining looked up at Chao Yuqing. Chao Yuqing said, There's no such thing as perfect and flawless in this world. Everything goes according to plan. There's always something that doesn't go your way. Take me, for example. I was born in a prestigious family, but I became a secret agent. As a secret agent, I had to be loyal to the emperor. I was arranged to marry someone I didn't like. From then on, every step I took was wasted. I actually spent most of my life living for others. But Sister E, the objective reality is sometimes not something we can change by relying on manpower. Since we can't change it, we have to learn to adapt to it, accept it, and accept it with a smile. Only then can we control it. Qin Yining pursed her lips and nodded. In these matters, Chao Yuqing was much more transparent than her biological mother. There were many reasons she didn't dare to tell the Sun clan, because even if she did, she wouldn't get any relief. Instead, it would make more people anxious. Chao Yuqing was the same kind of person as her father. She was able to give her advice and comfort. She understood these reasons. However, when someone was able to tell her in detail and sincerely think for her, this feeling really made her feel fulfilled. I understand. Qin Yining hugged Chao Yuqing. Thank you, Aunt Chao. Silly girl, what are you thanking me for? Chao Yuqing hugged Qin Yining back. You're a sensible person. You might not necessarily not understand these reasons. You're just worried about it. But don't be so pessimistic. Things haven't happened yet, so there's still a chance. Right now, what we need to do is to get out of the city and meet up with Wang Yi and the others. Everything else is secondary. Even if we have to worry about these things, we have to wait until we understand everything. I was worrying for nothing. Qin Yining smiled. Chao Yuqing smiled. It's because I care that I'm worried. She held Qin Yining's hand and said, Let's go back. We can't walk away for too long. Qin Yining nodded. He chatted and laughed with Chao Yuqing as they walked towards the main room. Qin Yining took the children to play crazily in the fields for 2 days. They had originally planned to leave the city, But with Qin Huayuan's prior arrangements and Xiao Yuqing's support, the group left the city in 4 groups. After disguising themselves, everything went very smoothly. After meeting up outside the city, the group did not dare to delay and headed directly in the direction of Pang Zhao's army. Wang Yi. The scouts have already found the whereabouts of the Wang Fei's group. Huzi rushed into the tent with large strides and reported to Pang Xiao, who was discussing countermeasures with Jiziyu and Qin Huayuan. His face was beaming with joy as if it was the new year. Qin Huayuan could not help but laugh. Looks like their journey was quite smooth. Jiziyu teased. Jishi was still worried earlier. I told you that Uncle Qin's plan would not have any problems. After interacting with each other day and night, Qin Huayuan's charisma had already infected the people around Pang Xiao. Jiziyu sincerely called him Uncle Qin in this life. Pang Xiao blushed and said, I was confused because I was too concerned. Father-in-law, I'll go welcome them. Qin Huayuan teased. If I say no, you won't listen to me, right? Pang Xiao had already stood up and was walking out. Hearing this, he turned back and said, Father-in-law, do you want to come with me? Qin Huayuan was stunned and then laughed loudly. As he stood up and walked out, he said, You child, have you been with Sister E for too long? You're already so old, yet you're still acting like this. Chapter 1182. It was a hot noon in August. Pang Xiao, who was dressed in black, was sitting upright on Black Cloud's shiny fur. His body was covered in a thin layer of sweat, and beads of sweat were rolling down from his forehead. However, he didn't care about this at all. His eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked ahead on the official road. Not long after, he had left Jiziyu and Qin Huayuan's party far behind. This kid is so anxious. Mu Jinghu laughed in spite of himself. Qin Huayuan lifted the curtains of the carriage and looked at Pang Xiao riding away. He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh in spite of himself. He hadn't seen Qin Yining for a few years and missed him dearly. However, as an elder, it wasn't good for him to behave in front of others. Jiziyu smiled and didn't say anything for a while. Qin Huayuan saw Jiziyu's expression from the corner of his eye and sat back in the carriage. Jiziyu and the Anyang Princess Royal were husband and wife after all. There were rumors that the Princess Royal was killed by the people who tried to rescue Qin Yining. Jiziyu didn't show any abnormality in front of Pang Xiao and was willing to follow Pang Xiao. This was their brotherly affection. However, no matter how deep their brotherly affection was, it didn't mean that Jiziyu wouldn't care about the death of the person who slept next to him. Qin Huayuan was a little worried. If he met Qin Yining later and there was any unhappiness, it would be detrimental to the harmony between Jiziyu and Pang Xiao in the future. Qin Yining, who was wearing a coarse cloth dress, was sitting in the carriage with the 2 children and playing with a flower rope. Mother, look, what is this? Zhao Gu'er's chubby little hands nimbly played with a pattern. Mother, guess. That's right. Zhao Gu has a reward for you. Qin Yining held Han Gu'er in her arms. Happiness was about to overflow from her eyes. She pursed her lips and pretended not to know. After hesitating for a long time, she said, What is it? I really want Brother Zhao's reward. Brother Han was twisting around in Qin Yining's embrace. Seeing how Qin Yining was stumped by his brother, he secretly whispered into Qin Yining's ear, Mother, it's Matsi. Then, he pretended that nothing had happened and lowered his head to fiddle with his fingers, as if nothing had happened. Qin Yining was overjoyed. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Brother Zhao glance at Brother Han. He knew that Brother Han must have noticed that his younger brother was secretly reminding him. But Brother Zhao didn't say anything. He only acted as if he didn't notice and asked seriously, Mother, quickly guess. Qin Yining felt a sense of bliss from being doted on by his 2 sons. After pondering for a moment, he said, Is it Matsi? Yes. Mother, you're so smart. Brother Zhao threw the flower rope away, hugged Qin Yining's neck, and kissed him. I'll reward you with a kiss. Qin Yining giggled from his teasing. He leaned over and said, What about here? I want one here too. However, Brother Zhao turned his face away. I'm not giving. Mother, guess another riddle. I'll only give you a kiss if you guess correctly. Qin Yining pouted and blinked his large eyes in disappointment. Oh. Brother Han leaned over and gave a loud kiss. He even stuck his tongue out at Brother Zhao and made a funny face. Brother Zhao pounced forward to grab Brother Han. Brother Han cried out, "Mother, brother's going to pinch me. Mother." Qin Yining hugged one and then another. He was laughing so hard that he was about to choke. As he was only focused on playing, he didn't notice that the carriage was gradually coming to a stop. The carriage's curtains were lifted and Pang Xiao was squatting at the shaft. He looked at the mother and children who were laughing together in the carriage. His eyes were as gentle as a warm spring. Qin Yining heard the sound and looked up to meet Pang Xiao's eyes. He was stunned. "Daddy!" The twins shouted in unison and pounced on Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao hugged the two children. "Little brats, what are you playing?" "We're playing with a flower rope with Mother." Qin Yining knelt in the carriage. Her watery eyes were filled with tears, but she looked at Pang Xiao with a smile. "You're here." Pang Xiao nodded. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. His phoenix eyes were filled with longing, pity, guilt, and other emotions. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Qin Yining lowered her eyes, and a tear fell. Pang Xiao immediately panicked. He put the two children aside and hurried into the carriage. He clumsily wiped her tears with his sleeve. Don't cry, don't cry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you in the capital and caused you to almost lose your life. It's my fault. I'm too incompetent." Qin Yining shook his head. "It's not your fault. Besides, everything was just a scare." She sniffled. She didn't want to disturb the reunion. She smiled and said, "Sister Yun and Brother Xian are in the carriage behind us. Do you want to go take a look?" Pang Xiao shook his head. He stretched out his long arms and hugged Qin Yining in his arms. "Sister Yi, I'm sorry. He had too much guilt. He sent the Southern Pacifying Army away." Qin Yining was pregnant and had to worry about their provisions. A woman's childbirth was a walk through the gates of hell. What's more, Qin Yining gave birth to twins of mixed gender. Not only did he not accompany and take care of her, but he also made her bear all the troubles by herself. In the end, she was even almost killed by someone. Until now, her little face was still pale, and her injuries had not healed. They were all captured by Li Qitian, and in the end, there was a slim chance of survival. Even a quiet and gentle girl was locked up in a prisoner carriage and paraded through the streets. What did it feel like to be locked in a prisoner carriage? When he locked Si Qin and the others in the prisoner carriage, it was also because he thought of Qin Yining's suffering. He couldn't help but add this suffering to the people who indirectly caused Qin Yining's suffering. Qin Yining shook her head. She wanted to say that it was okay and that there was nothing to be sorry about. However, after parting with Pang Xiao, she narrowly escaped death. There were several times when she almost never saw him again. In front of the children, she was a mother. She couldn't show any weakness. In front of the attendants, she was the master. She couldn't lose her sense of direction. After seeing Pang Xiao, she couldn't control her feelings of grievance and fear. Qin Yining buried herself in Pang Xiao's arms and couldn't help but choke with sobs. Pang Xiao's heart ached. He patted her back with his big hand. "I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I won't put you in danger again." When Qin Yining started crying, Brother Zhao and Brother Han also started sobbing. Ji Yun and Bing Tang, who were outside the carriage, were also sniffling. Others didn't know, but they had personally witnessed everything that Qin Yining had gone through. Those who didn't know would think that Qin Yining was living a glamorous life as a princess consort. However, only those who followed her knew that Qin Yining was able to live until today because of God's blessings. If there was even the slightest deviation, Pang Xiao and Qin Yining would never meet again. Qin Huaiyuan's carriage slowly stopped by the side of the road. Mu Jinghu and Ji Ziyu dismounted and escorted Qin Huaiyuan down the carriage. The group looked at each other strangely. "What's the matter? Why does everyone look like they're crying?" Huzi spoke more straightforwardly. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the teary-eyed Bing Tang roll her eyes at him. Bing Tang saw Qin Huaiyuan and hurriedly curtsied. She told the carriage, "Princess consort, Lord Qin is here." Qin Yining was sobbing. When she heard this, she forgot to cry and looked up at Pang Xiao. Is it my father? Pang Xiao nodded and wiped her tears with his sleeve. Father-in-law came with me. Qin Yining nodded. When she saw that Brother Zhao and Brother Han were still sobbing and wiping their tears, she felt extremely guilty. She only cared about herself and forgot about her children. Okay, mother, don't cry. Brother Zhao and Brother Han also don't cry. Okay? The two children nodded in unison. Brother Han even let out a sobbing hiccup. Qin Yining helped the children wipe their faces. Pang Xiao turned around and jumped off the carriage. He turned around and carried the children off the carriage. Grandfather, the two children said in unison. They ran over to Qin Huayuan with their short legs and saluted respectfully. Grandfather as well. Good. Qin Huayuan patted their small heads and then smiled at Qin Yining. Father. Qin Yining's tears gushed out again. She quickly walked over and knelt down to kowtow. Qin Huayuan supported Qin Yining with both hands. Quickly get up. Qin Yining looked up at Qin Huayuan and smiled with tears in her eyes. Father, how is your health? Are my mother, grandmother, and second uncle all well? They're all well, all well. Your grandmother is old and her health is deteriorating day by day, but she's still doing well. The rest of them are adapting well in Shiyu. Qin Yining nodded repeatedly. Streams of tears fell and wet her lapel. Father, you've worked hard these days. It's your daughter's fault for letting you work so hard. Qin Huayuan smiled and shook his head. You've already done very well. Father has also heard about your experiences these days. Father is relieved to see you again today. Qin Yining looked at Mu Jinghu. She pursed her lips and bowed deeply. Mu Gongzi, I'm sorry. After all, Tian Jizi died to save her. Regardless of the past, Qin Yining felt guilty about this. Mu Jinghu shook his head and smiled. You can't be blamed for this. Shizhuan has her own considerations for everything. Since she did this, she had already considered the consequences and accepted them. You don't have to blame yourself at all. Although she said this, it was impossible for her not to be touched when someone sacrificed themselves for her. When she saw Jiziyu again, Qin Yining's lips moved. But in the end, she said directly, the outside world is saying that the eldest princess of Anyang was killed by my people. Actually, that's not the case. That day, she went to the prison to humiliate me. Coincidentally, someone came to rescue me. The other party killed their way into the prison and didn't look carefully before they killed her. Although I didn't do anything directly, I indirectly harmed her. I'm sorry. In fact, Jiziyu's people had already investigated the situation that day. Even if Qin Yining didn't explain, he knew that Qin Yining couldn't be blamed for this. However, Qin Yining was able to speak frankly and didn't hide anything. This made Jiziyu feel much better. At the very least, her character was good enough for Pang Xiao. I already know about this matter. If she didn't go to the prison to humiliate you, she wouldn't have met those people. Jiziyu didn't directly mention Tian Jizi's name. After all, Tian Jizi was Mu Jinghu's Shizhuan. Moreover, she was already dead. They were now in the same situation as Pang Xiao, so it wasn't good to mention this matter. Pang Xiao patted Jiziyu's shoulder to comfort him. Chapter 1183. Okay. Qin Huayuan's hands were pulled by his two little grandsons. He bent down to match the children's height and walked towards the second carriage. Qin Yining, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang had already arrived at the side of the carriage. They instructed the wet nurse to carry the children down. Brother Xian and Sister Yun were both wearing red jackets. They had gold necklaces around their necks and small silver bracelets on their wrists. Their small faces were white and tender, and their eyes were black and bright. They were like two money-making dolls. They were not afraid of strangers when they saw people. They stared at Qin Huayuan with their big eyes and even grinned. Qin Huayuan liked them so much that his eyes lit up. However, he only looked at them reservedly and nodded. They're very cute. They look like you. I think so too. Qin Yining also smiled. Zhao Gu and Han Gu looked like Pang Xiao and her, but Xian Gu and Yin Gu both looked like her. Pang Xiao came to the side and stretched his neck to take a look. His eyes were also overflowing with love. However, when he looked at Brother Zhao and Brother Han, he only touched the two children's small hands. He turned to Qin Yining and said, "Thank you for your hard work." His words were very heavy. Qin Yining had suffered twice as much that day. After that, he had gone through a near-death experience to be able to reunite with her today. Qin Yining was lucky to be able to survive. Moreover, she had taken care of the two children so well. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji had been chatting for a while. Su Weiji led Xiaoyu to Qin Huayuan and saluted. "Hello, Mr. Qin." Qin Huayuan hurriedly returned the salute. He supported Xiaoyu's arm with both hands and then saluted. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter these days. If it weren't for Mister's plan, I'm afraid my daughter wouldn't have been able to keep her life." Xiaoyu was flattered and hurriedly returned the greeting. Duke Qin's words are too serious. Wang Fei is intelligent and good at strategizing. This old one is just following Wang Fei's orders. This old one is ignorant and shallow. How could I dare to mention the word strategizing? Duke Qin, don't embarrass this old man. Qin Huayuan hurriedly shook his head and thanked her again. Xiaoyu's face flushed red, and she waved her hands repeatedly, but her heart was very warm. Who wouldn't want to be valued by the main family? Besides, he had always treated Pang Xiao and Qin Yining with all his heart and soul. The group gathered for a short while and was about to set off for the barracks. When Brother Zhao and Brother Han saw Pang Xiao, they clung on to Pang Xiao like monkeys climbing a tree and refused to get down. "Daddy, take me to ride a horse. I also want Daddy to bring me to ride a horse." Qin Yining smiled and said, "It's going to be dangerous soon. Why don't you ride the carriage with Nyang Qin?" "No." Brother Han twisted his small body and hugged Pang Xiao's neck. Brother Zhao simply climbed up Pang Xiao's arm and onto his shoulder. Pang Xiao hugged one and carried the other. He smiled brightly and said, "It's fine. Don't worry. I'll take them and they won't fall." Jiziyu was still worried and rode White Cloud closer. "Which one of you is willing to ride a horse with me?" Uzi also pulled Pang Zhao's Black Cloud over. Brother Zhao looked at White Cloud's silver fur under the sunlight and hesitantly said, "Uncle Ji, I want to ride a white horse." Jiziyu smiled and urged his horse closer. With a grab of his arm, he pulled Brother Zhao in front of him. Pang Xiao carried Brother Han and leaped into the air, leaping onto the horse's back. Brother Han was so happy that he shouted, "We are flying high. Fly high." Jia! The two horses, one black and one white, galloped towards the barracks. Qin Yining smiled helplessly and got on the carriage with Qin Huayuan and the others. Accompanied by Mu Jinghu, Hu Zi, and the others, they also headed towards the barracks. Pang Zhao's family was reunited and laughing. At this time, Li Qitian was restlessly pacing back and forth in the imperial study. The spy said anxiously in a low voice, "Your Majesty, the spy sent to contact Duke Ding hasn't sent back any news yet. Lord Lei and Lord Song have also joined Pang Xiao. What should we do next?" Li Qitian's face was heavy. 300,000 soldiers pressed on the border and passed through all the towns without wasting a single soldier. It was like a knife stabbing into the Zhou's heart. His troops were limited. If he sent them out to meet the enemy, it would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The limited troops could only be left to defend the city. When Pang Zhao's troops were still far away, the sense of panic was not as strong as it was now. Pang Xiao was getting closer and closer. The 300,000 soldiers pressing on the border were like a 1,000-pound boulder hanging over their heads that could fall down at any time and smash them into meat paste. The anxiety of gradually walking towards a hopeless situation and not knowing when death would come was really unbearable. What should we do? Li Qitian could not help but murmur. He could no longer vent his anger. His heart was only filled with panic. The spy lowered his eyes and deliberated over his words. "Your Majesty, if you can't kill Pang Xiao in one fell swoop, it's best to find a way to reconcile." Reconcile? It sounded nice, but wasn't it just asking him to make peace with Pang Xiao? In recent days, this was not the first time someone had mentioned this to him. From the initial humiliation and anger to the current confusion and despair, it had only been a few days. It turned out that it was not that difficult to admit one's failure and weakness. It was so sad. It was really laughable. He already has the strength to ascend to the throne. How could he easily accept reconciliation? Moreover, if we can't come up with conditions that are more tempting than the most powerful person in the world, what right do they have to reconcile with us? The spy was silent for a while. After a while, he carefully said, "In that case, there is only one way left. Of the 36 stratagems, the best one is to leave." Li Qiqian's eyebrows twitched. If it were any other day, he would have already dragged the spy out and beheaded him. But now, there were fewer and fewer people at his side that could be used. The courtiers had not even thought of a decent solution these days. Li Qiqian could no longer just drag the spy out and behead him and issue an edict. "We are the son of heaven. Even if the country is destroyed, we cannot yield." Li Qiqian pursed his lips and said stubbornly, "Otherwise, how can we face our ancestors in the future?" The spy was stunned when he heard this. He cursed in his heart. "It's not like this is the inheritance of our ancestors. It was only obtained through a rebellion. Do you really think it's passed down from our ancestors? At this time, it's best to protect ourselves. Your Majesty, as long as the green hills remain, there will be firewood." Was Pang Xiao such a frightening existence in the eyes of these courtiers? They were so afraid that they didn't even have the slightest thought of resisting. Thinking about it again, an army of 300,000 was pressing down on the border. There was a great disparity in the number of soldiers and horses. In addition, the other side had 2 war gods holding the line. How could they even think of resisting? This battle had already been lost before the battle had even begun. If he really did run away, how could he raise his head in the future? But if he didn't run away when Pang Zhao's army arrived, wouldn't he really die at the hands of that bastard Pang Xiao? At this time, a burst of chaotic footsteps suddenly came from outside the imperial study. Then, a sharp cry sounded. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" Li Qiqian was originally worried, but when he suddenly heard this voice, his heart quivered in fright. "What's the matter?" Li Qiqian asked in a deep voice. Xiong Jinshui and the young eunuchs went to open the door of the hall. They saw the empress with her long hair hanging loose and tears on her face rushing in. She was too anxious and tripped over the high threshold. She was caught off guard and made a dull sound. But the empress couldn't care less. "Your Majesty, it's not good. Brother Hao is missing. Brother Hao is missing." Li Qiqian suddenly opened his eyes wide and said in disbelief, "How can it be? Where are the people following him? Brother Hao didn't come to the palace to eat when the class was over today. I waited for a long time and didn't see him, so I ordered the people around me to go out and look for him. Not long after, they found the young eunuchs following Brother Hao. They said that Brother Hao got lost in the imperial garden." The empress cried and knelt down to Cao. "I beg your Majesty, I only have one Brother Hao. I beg your Majesty to quickly order people to look for him. At this critical juncture, if someone were to kidnap Brother Hao, how could the child still be alive?" Li Qiqian immediately ordered, "Immediately send people to investigate." Yes, the secret agent didn't care about anything else and hurriedly led people to find the prince's whereabouts. The empress sat paralyzed on the ground, covering her face and crying sorrowfully, "Your Majesty, who is it? Who is it? Do you think Brother Hao will? If something happens to Brother Hao, how can I continue to live?" Li Qiqian paced around the ground and gnashed his teeth. "It must be Pang Zhishi." The empress stopped crying for a moment, then continued to sob. "Could it be him? Usually, he doesn't look like someone who would do such a thing to a child. He seems to be loyal and good. What's the result? It's the 100,000 soldiers who came to the city with the intention of rebelling. I think he kidnapped Brother Hao just to have one more condition to threaten me." The empress wiped her tears and said, "Your Majesty, if he wanted to attack, he could have just sent the army directly. Why did he have to make a move on my son? If his people could walk freely in the palace, and make a move on our brother Hao to say something unpleasant, wouldn't your majesty's safety be no longer guaranteed? I'm afraid that someone in the court had evil intentions. Seeing how fierce Pang Xiao was, they wanted to take brother Hao to surrender. Who knows? Li Qitian frowned slightly when he heard this. Why is the empress speaking for Pang Xiao? The empress's breath stopped. Then she sobbed and said, Your Majesty, why do you say that? It's my son who is lost. Why would I speak for the enemy? I just don't want to look in the wrong direction and delay the best time to find brother Hao. Clutching her chest, the empress cried softly on the ground, Brother Hao, my brother Hao. The mother crying and the son crying really made people feel sad. Li Qitian also realized that he was too suspicious just now, so he went forward to help the empress up. Although this woman was already old, and he usually didn't get much interest from her, in times of crisis, he could see what kind of person was truly reliable, and that was why she wouldn't leave him. Li Qitian held the empress in his arms and patted her back comfortingly. I will definitely find brother Hao. The empress was a little surprised. Her body stiffened for a moment before relaxing. She leaned on Li Qitian's shoulder and sobbed softly. I know that brother Hao is also your majesty's favorite. How could you abandon him? I'm just sad. Who is so cruel to make a move on such a young child? Chapter 1184. Something big had happened in the imperial palace. Ordinary people did not know the reason. The common people only knew that martial law had been imposed everywhere in the capital. There were also bailiffs from Shuntian Manor and the Jingji guards in the city patrolling everywhere. They spread out along the palace walls to search in all directions. Could it be that a spy entered? Some people whispered. As soon as this was said, someone immediately analyzed. No, the Totters have been completely chased out. Their Khans are dead. I heard that the Totters are fighting among themselves for the position of Khans. How can they still have the mood to come to the Zhou to cause trouble? Then what do you think is going on? I'm afraid that something has gone missing in the palace. Otherwise, they wouldn't be searching around the palace walls. The people didn't know what was going on, but the Jingji guards asked everyone they met. Soon, someone spread the news that these people were looking for a 4-year-old boy. Everyone began to guess which family's child would attract the attention of the Jiangyi guards. Soon, someone guessed that it was a member of the imperial family. Could it be your majesty's nephew? I've never heard of your majesty's nephew being this age. But the prince, the person who spoke, realized that something was wrong. His eyes widened, and he instantly shut his mouth. Everyone was guessing in their hearts. Could it be that the prince had gone missing? The palace was heavily guarded. How could the emperor's son go missing so easily? Perhaps they were imagining things and guessing wrongly? The people who didn't know the truth didn't dare to talk nonsense anymore. Instead, they began to worry about themselves. Those bailiffs were very overbearing. There is no guarantee that one of the bailiffs would take revenge on a private matter. What if they took this opportunity to harm their families? The atmosphere in the capital, which was already oppressive, became even more tense. The nobles in the palace were frightened, and the people were not spared. If it was like this in the capital, then what about the palace? Within the walls of the palace, everyone's lives were thrown into chaos. In order to search for the prince's whereabouts and any clues, countless palace servants were implicated, and many innocent people were taken advantage of to get rid of them. Because of Li Helan's death, the Empress Dowager had fallen seriously ill. She had been clamoring for Li Qitian to avenge Li Helan, but Li Qitian had never responded. The Empress Dowager was disheartened. Now the palace was in chaos. Even if Li Qitian and the Empress didn't deliberately tell her, the Empress Dowager had heard it from the palace maids around her. What did you say? You're saying that the one who went missing was Hao? Seeing that the Empress Dowager's face was livid, the palace maid knelt down in a panic. I just heard it from the guards who were searching. I don't know what exactly happened. The Empress Dowager's face was deathly pale, her eyes glazed over. It took her quite a while to catch her breath, and then she shouted, Why haven't you called the emperor here yet? The palace servants complained incessantly in their hearts. The imperial study used to be a cushy job, but now everyone wanted to avoid it. If the prince really went missing, it would be lucky if the imperial study didn't get angry. What's more, the Empress Dowager had such an attitude. If they want to find the emperor, wouldn't they be implicated? Then Mammy Li, the personal servant of the Empress Dowager, comforted her. Empress Dowager, don't be anxious. Your Majesty didn't tell you about it, because he was afraid that you would be worried and hurt your health. The little prince is blessed by God. Nothing will happen to him. The Empress Dowager sat up with a big pillow. When she moved, the joints all over her body were cracking. Holding her forehead, she felt dizzy for a moment. Her vision turned black. But the Empress Dowager didn't care about it all. They're deceiving me, an old woman without real power. That wastrel Madame Zhang. Does she think that if she keeps it a secret, I won't punish her? Call Madame Zhang over. Obviously, the Empress Dowager was extremely angry, but she could still keep her reason. She knew that it was useless to make a scene in front of the emperor. But the Empress was easy to control. If she wanted to ask something, it was easier to get a satisfactory answer from the Empress. The palace servants breathed a sigh of relief. At least the Empress Dowager still had some reason and knew to avoid the emperor. Someone rushed to the palace of earthly tranquility to invite the Empress. At this time, the Empress was eating the bitter medicine in the small white porcelain bowl and snow-white spoon brought by the palace maids. The chief palace maid, Ruo Lan, persuaded her softly. Your Majesty, since the old mamas around you were sent out of the palace to recuperate, your health has been poor. Now you are anxious because of the prince, but you can't ignore your health. If you fall ill, who can wholeheartedly keep an eye on people to find the whereabouts of His Highness? The Empress lowered her eyes, and her eyelashes covered the emotions in her eyes. Her pale lips sipped the black medicine as if she couldn't feel the bitterness. She quickly took the medicine, took a bite of the blue and white carp, and almost rinsed her mouth. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief and spat it into the lotus basket basin. Then she asked, Is there any news? Did you find any clues near the Imperial Garden? Your Majesty, the palace servants who were on duty in the Imperial Garden have been arrested. Your Majesty ordered people to interrogate them one by one. Your Majesty even arranged for people to search for the whereabouts of the several imperial concubines in the harem. Don't worry, the prince will be fine. The Empress nodded and lowered her head again with a worried frown. The palace servants knew that the Empress lost her beloved only son and was sad. They also knew that their persuasion was useless, so they all quieted down. At this time, the palace maid in front of the palace of earthly tranquility came in to pass on a message. Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager ordered people to invite you over. Perhaps the Empress Dowager found out about His Highness. The Empress' heart trembled. She calmly thought for a moment before standing up. I know. I will go immediately. The palace servants helped the Empress change clothes and comb her hair, but the Empress waved her hand and refused. Her face was haggard, and her pale face had a waxy yellow color. In just 2 or 3 days, she had lost a lot of weight, and her cheeks were sunken. Just as she walked out of the palace of earthly tranquility, the Empress felt dizzy and her vision darkened. Before she could step on the shoulder, she fell to the ground. Empress! The palace servants were shocked. Quick, call the imperial doctor. The Empress fainted. The Empress fainted, and the Imperial Institute of Medicine panicked. The Empress Dowager was so angry that she beat the Arhut bed, making the rosewood Arhut bed sound. Aijia thinks she did it on purpose. She lost Aijia's good grandson and has no way to explain, so she pretended to faint to deal with it. Tell the Emperor for Aijia. If something really happened to brother, how? Aijia only wants them to pay with their lives for the child. What are they doing all day? Such a group of people, but they can't even keep an eye on brother Hao. The palace servants didn't dare to say more and could only agree. Li Qitian soon received the news that the Empress had fainted and the Empress Dowager was furious. The prince had gone missing, and the city had sped up the search. However, Pang Zhao's army was about to reach the city in 2 days. All the things that didn't belong to Ru Yi were put together, and Li Qitian was already in a terrible fix. Tell people to contact Duke Ding. No matter what, they must pass on my words. If they can't do it, they can bring their heads to see me. Present in Pang Zhao's camp, There was a lot of laughter. As night fell and the sky darkened, bonfires were lit everywhere in the camp. Other than the soldiers on duty who were in charge of patrolling, the rest of the people were sitting on the ground beside the bonfires, roasting their dry rations or the game they had caught themselves. Pang Xiao was very happy today. He drank a jar of wine with Jiziyu and Mu Jinghu, but he still didn't feel satisfied. Qin Yining was already tired. She covered her mouth and yawned. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "You're tired. Why don't you go to sleep first?" The children have already gone to sleep with the wet nurse. You don't have to be too tired. Just have a good sleep first. Qin Yining nodded. When she came to Pang Xiao's side, she no longer had to be on tenterhooks. Her safety was guaranteed, and her mind was completely relaxed. She didn't have to worry about the children, and she didn't have to worry about her own safety. Pang Xiao's suggestion was exactly what she wanted. She felt that she hadn't had a good sleep for a long time. "Then I'll go back. Don't drink too much wine." Qin Yining stood up and bowed to the others. Mu Jinghu, Jiziyu, and the others also cupped their hands to return Qin Yining's greeting. When Qin Yining was far away, Jiziyu smiled and teased, "You're not going back to accompany your wife?" Pang Xiao drank another mouthful of wine and smiled. Drinking wine is more important. Today's in a good mood, so it's best to drink wine. Come, cheers. Don't drink too much. That's all we have. Drinking wine will make things worse. Jiziyu persuaded. Pang Xiao nodded and didn't argue further. He began to talk about the matters of the capital while drinking wine. At this time, many soldiers had gathered together to chat. There were even some who took off their shirts to show off their martial arts skills. Pang Xiao was excited to see this. He also went to wrestle with someone. His strength was astonishing and his movements were nimble, causing the soldiers to shout repeatedly. Jiziyu got up and went to the surrounding forest to relieve himself. When he was about to return, he turned around and sensed a dark figure waving at him from the outermost camp. Jiziyu was immediately alert. Just as he was about to warn him, the person hurriedly knelt down and said in a low voice, "Duke Ding, listen to me." This was an unfamiliar voice, and the person was kneeling in the shadows, so he couldn't see the person's face clearly. Jiziyu didn't want to give this person any chance to turn the situation around, so he walked over with the horsewhip in his hand. "Duke Ding." The person spoke anxiously, but he still didn't dare to speak loudly. He only tried to persuade Jiziyu. "I'm here under orders to bring you a few words. I'm here alone, and I have no ill intentions." Jiziyu raised his eyebrows. He was curious about how Li Qitai was going to persuade him this time. Seeing that Jiziyu didn't immediately call for someone, the person in the shadows sighed in relief. He walked out a little and knelt down. "I'm Chunin, your Majesty's secret guard. I'm here to deliver your Majesty's message. You and your Majesty are sworn brothers. Now that the world has just stabilized, it's really not the time for us to fight among ourselves. Duke Ding is a loyal man, so you'll naturally put the safety of the people first. I hope that Duke Ding can help settle this matter for the sake of our brotherhood." "How do we settle it?" Jiziyu was curious. Chapter 1185. Jiziyu didn't say anything. He just stood there silently with his hands behind his back and looked down at the person kneeling not far away. Chunin looked at Jiziyu uneasily. When he saw that there was no change in his expression and that he didn't seem to be angry, he continued, "Duke Ding, you're a hero. Your reputation can't be ruined because of a moment of anger. If you insist on helping the traitor, won't you become a traitor yourself? How will the history books record you in the future?" Jiziyu still didn't say anything. He just slowly paced a few more steps. Although Chunin was a spy who had followed Li Qitian for many years and understood the power of an emperor, Jiziyu was a person who had fought bloody battles on the battlefield all year round. Moreover, Jiziyu had just returned from the Titan battlefield. His murderous aura was even more terrifying than Li Qitian's power of an emperor. Chunin swallowed his saliva and carefully observed Jiziyu's expression. When he saw that he still didn't show any signs of anger, he was relieved. "Duke Ding, you're a smart person. You must be able to see how much sincerity I've brought with me to this place. Please reconsider." Firstly, you have to be loyal to the emperor. Secondly, you have to ensure the stability of the world. Most importantly, you have to care about your reputation. Moreover, Anyang Princess Royal was killed by the Qin clan. If Duke Ding insists on helping Pang Xiao, who knows how many people will hate you and insult you behind your back in the future? Are you really willing to accept this? At this moment, Ji Ziyu had already walked up to Chunin. He was tall and had a peerless appearance. When he looked at people expressionlessly, he gave off a sense of superiority. Coupled with the murderous aura around him, cold sweat broke out on Chunin's back. However, Ji Ziyu's voice was very calm. So, you've been calling Pang Zhishi a traitor? How did you spread rumors to slander him in the capital? When he heard this, Chunin immediately felt that something was wrong. Duke Ding, why are you siding with the traitor? You still dare to say that? Ji Ziyu bent down and casually grabbed Chunin's neck with one hand, as if he was plucking a flower. He lifted Chunin up effortlessly. Chunin's eyes were wide open as he stared at Ji Ziyu in disbelief. He gasped for breath. Ji Ziyu smiled. He leaned closer to Chunin and whispered, "Do you know what I can't stand the most?" Ji Ziyu didn't give Chunin the chance to speak and said, "What I find most unbearable is those people who are obviously filthy to the point their souls are even more disgusting than the mud in a pigsty. Yet they just so happen to pretend to be noble and pure, and they treat others as blind and idiots to deceive them. Yet they don't know that the stench they carry is something that can't be concealed by the layer of skin that looks like a human." Chunin's mouth was wide open. He kicked his legs and tried to grab Ji Ziyu's hands, but it was to no avail. Your master is such a thing. He's jealous of the talented, ungrateful, and treacherous. He's shameful and laughable. Chunin couldn't say a word. He seemed to have no reaction to Ji Ziyu's insults. He was so suffocated that he almost couldn't hear. When Ji Ziyu saw Chunin's reaction, he suddenly tightened his grip. A cracking sound came from Chunin's throat. He fell to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. Blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. Ji Ziyu took out a snow-white handkerchief from his sleeve and wiped his hands in disgust before casually tossing it onto Chunin's body. After that, he walked towards the camp with his horsewhip in hand before calling his trusted aide over. "Go, clean it up. Also, send more people to protect the tents near the main tent where Wang Ye's family members are staying. Increase the patrols. Don't let anyone take advantage of this loophole." "Yes, sir." The trusted aide was a little surprised that Ji Ziyu had said so much in one breath. However, he didn't dare to delay and immediately went to give the orders. When he returned to the campfire, Pang Xiao had already finished his wrestling and was drinking a bowl of wine. When he saw Ji Ziyu return, he smiled and asked, "Alan, you're here too?" Ji Ziyu smiled. "Forget it. It's not the time for us to relax yet. Don't drink anymore." Pang Xiao smiled and nodded. He walked around the crowd and patted Ji Ziyu's shoulder. Then, he casually tied up his messy hair. "It's fine. I'm just happy that our family can be reunited." The two of them walked side by side toward the main tent. Pang Xiao raised his arm to tie up his hair as he walked. Ji Ziyu followed slowly. Ji Ziyu could tell that Pang Xiao was completely unguarded against him. In fact, if he wanted to harm Pang Xiao, it would be easy for him to succeed. It was no wonder that Li Qiqian chose him to persuade him. However, he didn't have such thoughts at all. Thinking about what Chunin said just now, Ji Ziyu couldn't help but sneer. Li Qiqian had a good plan. He wanted him to kill Pang Xiao. If he couldn't kill him, he could capture him alive. What kind of person did he think he was? Although he, Ji Ziyu, wasn't a gentleman, he knew that there were things that he should do and things that he shouldn't do. Pang Xiao had never done anything that went against morality. He had also never violated the oath they made when they rose up against Beiji's tyranny. On the other hand, Li Qiqian, who had ascended the throne, went against his promise. He was selfish and didn't care about the suffering of the people. He was willing to sacrifice the lives of innocent people for his own selfish reasons. If he could share his wealth with such a person, wouldn't he also be a scum? No matter what, Ji Ziyu, knew what was right and what was wrong. The two chatted for a while more before they went back to rest. The next day, after a day of rapid marching, the front of the army could already see the capital's city walls. Pang Shao didn't allow anyone to act rashly. He only ordered them to set up camp when they arrived. When the guards at the city gates saw the sea of people coming, they were so scared that their faces turned pale. They ran down the city walls in a panic and shouted, "Close the gates! Close the gates! The rebels are attacking!" The clear sky was clear and cloudless. Even the cool breeze from time to time couldn't dispel the panic in people's hearts. The entire area in front of the city gate was in a state of chaos after being disturbed by such a panicked voice. The people who were going in and out of the city gate were now crazily running into the city. Dust flew everywhere on the road. Even the city gate was closed with a bang. There were shoes, bags, and carts that people didn't have time to pick up on the ground outside the city. When the Titan people attacked, everyone had the same reaction. Seeing the city gate close, the Tiger Army and the Southern Peace Army didn't care and only listened to orders to set up camp. The soldiers that arrived later also advanced according to the formation. With the northern city gate as the starting point, they moved to the two sides of the city. It was clear that they wanted to surround the entire city. Moreover, the 300,000 soldiers that Pang Shao brought did have the ability to do so. The soldiers guarding the city quickly went to the palace to report the situation. The city immediately became chaotic. The streets and alleys were filled with people discussing this matter. No one was willing to lose their lives. When the soldiers arrived at the city gates, no one could pat their chest and say that Prince Zhongxun wouldn't kill anyone. However, compared to the soldiers guarding the city and the officials of the imperial court, the people were more relaxed. After all, Pang Shao wasn't the type to kill innocent people. Everyone was just worried about being caught in the crossfire. "Your Majesty, quickly give the order. What should we do now?" The officials of the imperial court who were smarter and more resourceful were all called to Yangxin Palace Hall. Li Qitian's face was ashen as he paced back and forth on the ground. "You came to ask me? Did I raise all of you for nothing? At the crucial moment, you come to ask me about everything. What's the use of having all of you?" Li Qitian was so anxious that he was sweating all over. The courtiers were also at a loss for what to do and were in a state of disarray. When they saw Pang Zhao soldiers arrive at the city gates, they finally understood the terror of a large army. It was a kind of mountain flood and tsunami attack. Ordinary people couldn't save them. "Your Majesty, the only thing we can do right now is to not start a war. Once we start a war, the army will directly charge in. How can we win? At that time, the people will be in a terrible situation." "That's right. Your Majesty, you must think of a way to stabilize Pang Shao. You must not start a war." Li Qitian frowned and gritted his teeth. "You mean to say that you want me to immediately ask for peace, so that Pang Shao won't lead the army in so that you can save your worthless lives? Your Majesty, we don't care if we die, but we feel sorry for the people in the court. Besides, how can we strike a stone with an egg right now? The faster we start a war, the faster Zhou's destruction will be." "Impudent." Li Qitian turned around and glared at the old official who spoke. Only then did he realize that the people who spoke just now were all Northern Ji's remaining elders. "You Ziqiu, could it be that this is your way of being a subject? Your loyalty is to endlessly slander the dynasty, to slander the emperor." "Your Majesty, please calm down. This official didn't mean that. It's just that now that the soldiers are at the city gates, if we want to protect your Majesty, the imperial family, and the people, we can only find a way to not start a war." "That's right. Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please forgive this official's crimes." To say something unpleasant, more than 10 years ago, when Pang Shao and Ji Lan led the army to attack the capital, it was a tragic situation. The people in the city closed their doors and didn't walk on the streets. In the end, it was better. They were just frightened. However, how much burning, killing, and looting happened within the palace walls? Could it be that your Majesty personally experienced it and doesn't remember? "Song Quan, you're impudent. Is that something you can mention?" When Li Qitian was reminded of the experience of destroying Northern Ji, he couldn't help but glare angrily and point at the person who spoke. This was also a Northern Ji elder. He usually didn't show off his abilities, but now, his words were sharp and piercing straight into people's hearts. Song Quan didn't care at all and directly said, "Your Majesty hasn't forgotten, right? Back then, Your Majesty issued a decree, so almost no one within the palace walls was spared. If we really start a war now, Pang Xiao and Jilan will inevitably repeat the same mistakes. Back then, Your Majesty, Jilan, and Jilan overwhelmingly defeated Northern Ji. Now the two of them are still in an alliance, but Your Majesty is standing on the opposite side." Li Qiqian felt as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water over his head, and his entire body trembled. Chapter 1186. Li Qiqian could never have imagined that he would one day be stuck in this dilemma. He wasn't stupid, but he couldn't remember how he had allowed things to develop to this point. "Your Majesty, Pang Zhao's group has already deployed their troops outside the city. If you don't make a decision now, I'm afraid it will be too late." The officials led by Yu Ziqiu, Song Quan, and the others all knelt down. "Your Majesty, please prioritize the safety of the people." Li Qiqian looked at the officials kneeling on the ground. His eyes were empty for a moment, but after a moment of extreme anger, he burst into laughter. His smile grew deeper and deeper. Laughter overflowed from his throat like a broken windbox. "Ridiculous, extremely ridiculous." Li Qiqian's smile faded. He pointed at the kneeling officials. "What do you mean by prioritizing the people? Aren't you thinking about the safety of your entire family? If I ask for peace, I will be the ruler of a destroyed country. When the time comes, you can just continue to pledge allegiance to Pang Xiao, like you pledged allegiance to Dezhou." Everyone understood what he meant, but when it was put on the table, it really wasn't acceptable. This was because most of the officials kneeling on the ground were surrendered officials of Beiji. Their thoughts had indeed been stirred up by the repeated proclamations. After all, it had only been 10 years since that incident. The deep-rooted sense of belonging couldn't be completely changed overnight. Moreover, in order to build the imperial mausoleum for himself, His Majesty didn't even care about the lives of the people. He even wrote IOUs for the salaries of the officials. To serve such a ruler, the fact that they were firm in their beliefs and didn't immediately leave Dezhou to avoid the disaster was already a sign of their determination. Seeing that the officials didn't say anything and were all kneeling like wooden pillars, Li Qiqian became even angrier. However, he couldn't say any more insults. What was the use of being angry now? What was the use of being anxious? Even if he killed all these people in a fit of anger, it wouldn't change the current situation. It would only make him as embarrassed as a defeated rooster. The spy sent to find Jiziyu still hadn't returned. As for peace, he didn't have anything more important than unifying the country, to persuade Pang Xiao to give up the world at his fingertips. The only thing he could do now was to pray for a miracle and wait. He was waiting for a massacre, waiting for release. At that time, he would be filled with hot blood, and people would say that at least he, the emperor, was not a coward who opened the door to surrender. How pathetic. What a joke. Percent, Wang Yi. According to your orders, the flanks have completely surrounded the capital. As long as you give the order, it will be taken down within a day. Pang Xiao nodded and ordered with a serious face. Tell everyone not to disturb the people, not to burn, kill, and rape. Anyone who disobeys will be punished according to military law. Yes. The deputy general relayed the message. Jiziyu asked, when do you plan to attack? Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows and smiled. There's no hurry. Everyone has traveled a long way, so we should give them some time to adjust. Jiziyu pursed his lips and smiled. He crossed his arms and said, do you think I don't understand you? You just pity the people in the city and give our people time to prepare. At the same time, give the people some time to adjust. In the future, if they can hide in their homes and try not to come out, many people will be saved. Pang Xiao laughed and patted Jiziyu's shoulder. Forget it, you're right. His eyes were gloomy and helpless. At first, I didn't want things to be like this. No one had the ability to predict the future. 2 years ago, Pang Xiao would never have thought that he would one day lead 300,000 soldiers to surround the capital. He didn't think that so many people would be willing to follow him and do such a rebellious thing. These people saw him as a leader, so he had to be a leader that met everyone's expectations. Otherwise, he would definitely fall in the future, just like Li Qitian. Speaking of which, things were really beyond his expectations, and he was very tired. But when everything was no longer about his personal interests, but the interests of many people, he had no other choice. Wang Yi, Xie Yu, and Su Weiji came forward and bowed to Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. I wonder if Wang Yi intends to use peaceful means before using force or directly crush them with military strength. Do you intend to negotiate with His Majesty? Pang Xiao shook his head. There's nothing to talk about, but we don't want to attack immediately. Let's leave it at that for now. Yes. Su Weiji smiled. Anyway, even if we don't do anything, it's enough to make them panic for a while. Pang Xiao nodded and looked in the direction of the capital with his hands behind his back. The banners flapped loudly in the wind. Past the fluttering banners and across the plains, one could see the towering capital standing alone. Behind it was the undulating shape of a mountain range, but everyone knew that the mountain was still far away. Pang Xiao's soldiers surrounded the capital just like that. They didn't attack, nor did they do anything. It was because of this silent attitude, coupled with the strong contrast in military strength, that all of the citizens were very frightened. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan sat side by side in front of the tent and looked at the people talking not far away. Qin Huayuan said, "It's been too long. I'm sure the citizens in the city are terrified to a certain extent. This isn't a good thing for you, Jishi. Everyone cares about their own lives. No one wants to lose their lives. Now that we're isolated outside the city gates, I don't know what Li Qitian's people will say about us in the city." Qin Yining rolled his eyes and came up with an idea. "I put in a lot of effort to build up Wang Ye's reputation. We can't let others ruin it at such a crucial time. Why don't we use the same trick again?" Qin Huayuan raised his eyebrows. He obviously understood what Qin Yining was talking about. "You want to use the method from Shiyu?" "Yes, but we'll change it this time." Qin Yining stood up and patted the hem of his skirt. He smiled and said, "Father, I'll go talk to Wang Yi." "Go ahead." Qin Huayuan leisurely picked up his teacup and took a sip of tea. Qin Yining quickly walked over to Pang Xiao and the others. Ji Ziyu saw Qin Yining walking over first. He stopped talking and nodded at Qin Yining in greeting. Qin Yining smiled and bowed. He immediately said, "I just thought of an idea." Pang Xiao lowered her head and looked at Qin Yining. She saw the light in his bright almond-shaped eyes and the crafty expression on his face. He looked like a cunning little fox. He couldn't help but smile and squint his eyes. He bent over and leaned closer to Qin Yining. "What's the idea? Let's hear it." Qin Yining smiled and covered his mouth. He whispered a few words in Pang Xiao's ear. Pang Xiao's tall body bent down to match Qin Yining's height. It was as if he wanted to protect her in his arms. Both of them were extremely beautiful. In the eyes of others, this scene was so beautiful that they couldn't bear to disturb it. Ji Ziyu looked expressionlessly in the direction of the city wall. After a moment, he smiled. Pang Xiao nodded repeatedly and scratched Qin Yining's nose. "You're so clever." Qin Yining touched his nose and smiled. "I'm just suggesting. I don't know much about war. You can discuss it with Mr. Xie and the others. I'm going back to have tea with my father." "Okay, go ahead." Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining's back gently and attentively. She called Ji Ziyu, Xie Yu, and Su Weiji to discuss it. The Jingji guards guarding the city stood on the North Gate Tower. They looked at the snow-white sea in the distance with melancholy. When they looked up, they suddenly saw a round object flying in the sky. That object floated and flew higher and higher. It was heading towards the capital. The Jingji guards didn't dare to be negligent. They hurriedly shouted, "Sir, look at what that is." When everyone heard this, they hurriedly came over and looked up at the sky. "It looks like a kite. There's more than one." As they spoke, several kites of different shapes flew over. They looked down along the thin lines of the kites and saw a few fast horses galloping under the city gate. The riders on the horses were wearing the Tiger Army's black soft armor. They were holding the kite's reel in their hands. What are they trying to do? Are they trying to provoke us? We didn't open the city gate to fight, so they're here to look down on us? The Tiger Army has always been brave and fierce. Now that Prince Zhongshuan is leading them, they probably want to fight. They're so bored that they're playing with kites? The Jingji guards all guessed that they were boosting the enemy's morale and undermining their own. However, the Shengwan didn't refute them because they felt the same way. Even when they saw the Tiger Army riding back and forth under the city gate and leisurely flying kites, they didn't dare to be rash. They didn't dare to shoot an arrow first, afraid that it would start a war. After the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn, the kites flew higher and higher. They were already above the city. Suddenly, a kite fell from the sky in a circle. Upon closer inspection, they saw that the string was broken. Before the Jingji guards could be surprised, they suddenly realized that the kites had broken their strings and fell directly into the city. Everyone looked down and realized that the string was cut off by the Jingji guards themselves. They deliberately used the wind to let the kites fly into the city. Then they cut the string and let the kites fall freely. The Jingji guards felt that something was wrong. One of them hurriedly reported to the Shangwan. The Shangwan hurriedly ordered someone to inform your majesty. Another group of people entered the city to think of a way to find the kites. Just as this news was being reported up the chain of command, and the people below were anxiously looking for the kites, there were already commoners in the city who had picked up the kites that had fallen on the streets. They could clearly see the words on them. They were written in plain language so that all commoners could understand them. The meaning was also very simple. Prince Zhongshuan will not massacre the city and will not harm any innocent commoners. The commoners are innocent. If you don't want to participate in the struggle of the imperial court, you only need to hide in your homes and close your doors. The Tiger Army and the Southern Pacifying Army will not disturb the commoners. The person who picked up the kites happened to be literate and had always admired Prince Zhongshuan. When he saw what was written on it, he immediately read it under the curious gazes of the surrounding people. The surrounding commoners were all very surprised. Prince Zhongshuan deliberately thought of a way to tell us this? That's right. How could Wang Yi think of using a kite to send us a message? I told you, Wang, you wouldn't kill the innocent. Naive, have you ever seen a war without killing commoners? Chapter 1187. Most of the common people did not understand the disputes in the court. They did not care who was right and who was wrong, who was black and who was white. In these chaotic times, what everyone hoped for the most was that their family could live well. Originally, everyone was worried and doubtful. Even though Pang Xiao had a reputation for being benevolent and righteous over the years, the common people respected him greatly. Pang Xiao was also feared by the emperor, and his entire family had been persecuted. Everyone was filled with sympathy for him as a tragic hero. However, when war was about to break out, no one could completely relax. They could not guarantee that Pang Xiao would not harm them. But now, everyone saw Pang Xiao's intentions. He sent a message into the city with a paper kite, telling them that as long as they did not walk around and did not cause any misunderstandings, they could keep their lives. Wang Yi even promised that they would not disturb the lives of any of the common people. Everyone's hearts were filled with hope, and the news on the paper kite quickly flew through the streets as if it had grown wings. No one knew when Pang Xiao would attack, so very quickly, everyone in the capital began to rush to buy food. In the imperial study, Li Qiqian looked at the paper kite presented to him. His hands gradually clenched, and his eyes were filled with panic and confusion that could not be hidden. This paper kite was the final warning, the warning that the Tiger Army and the Peace Southern Army would launch an attack on the capital. He was the emperor, but he had no money or people in his hands. Seeing the butcher's knife about to fall, he could only close his eyes and stretch out his neck to be killed. What are the reactions of the common people in the city? After a long while, Li Qiqian finally spoke with difficulty. The secret agent lowered his eyes and thought for a long time before carefully replying. Replying to your majesty, the common people seemed to have relaxed a lot. Li Qiqian took 2 steps back and powerlessly sat down on the bright yellow chair made of paulownia wood. His entire body seemed to have lost all of its strength. He leaned back and could not speak for a long time. There was a voice in his heart that kept asking himself, what exactly did he gain after all these years? Was he not the emperor that everyone wanted? Why was it that at this critical moment, no one was willing to reach out and help him? Was this the hypocrisy of the world? Seeing that he was about to be defeated, those bastards retracted their necks and no longer wanted to care about him. The emperor? He had been in power for 10 years. He had lived in glory and riches, but now he was forced to such a state. What should he do? Your Majesty. Xiong Jinshui quickly walked into the imperial study. Lord Yu, Lord Song, and several other lords request an audience. Li Qiqian was a little irritated. He didn't want to see them at first, but when he thought that they might have found a way, he immediately stood up and became spirited again. Let them in. Yes. Xiong Jinshui retreated. Not long after, a flurry of footsteps could be heard from outside the hall. Li Qiqian found it a little strange. Yu Ziqiu, Song Quan, and the other elders of Beiji were the most learned from their families. Whatever they did, they had to pay attention to the rules. Now that they had come to the imperial study to reply, their footsteps were so messy. It was really strange. Right at this moment, the spy who was kneeling on the ground suddenly stood up. His face was tense as he looked towards the palace door. His eyes became more and more focused, but his expression became more and more panicked. Your Majesty, there's a large group of people surrounding us. Li Qiqian turned pale with fright. He said in disbelief, What did you say? Your Majesty, the footsteps outside aren't right. There are at least a few hundred people coming from all directions. Li Qiqian's heart skipped a beat. The color of blood instantly receded from his face. His hands and feet felt as if they had been plunged into ice caverns. It was so cold that his entire body trembled. Pang Xiao is attacking. Li Qiqian cried out in alarm after a long while. Unexpectedly, just as he finished speaking, Yu Ziqiu's voice came from outside the palace door. Don't panic, son of heaven. We're only here to petition for the people. Li Qiqian knew that the situation was bad. He forced himself to calm down and quickly walked to the door. Creak! He pushed the door open. In the open space in front of the imperial study stood a great number of imperial guards and imperial guards. There were at least 200 to 300 people. These people all carried weapons in their hands and focused their gazes on the imperial study. One had to know that normally no one dared to just look at Tianyan. Li Qiqian pretended to be calm and asked in a clear voice, You're impudent. This is the imperial palace. You've gathered so many people outside of our imperial study. Could it be that you want a rebel? Yu Ziqiu's face wore an official smile. His voice was full of indifference as he said, Your Majesty, please calm down. This subject didn't have such intentions. Didn't have such intentions? Then what's the meaning of you standing here today? Could it be that you've brought the Imperial Guards, and Imperial Guards to perform a battle in front of us? Yu Ziqiu smiled. There's no need for Son of Heaven to be so anxious. This subject has thought about it, and only want to share Son of Heaven's worries. You love the people wholeheartedly and naturally can't bear to see them suffer. We also heard that Prince Zhongshuan sent kites into the city. After some discussion, this subject feels that Prince Zhongshuan isn't someone who goes back on his words. If we don't act blindly without thinking, we'll naturally be able to save the lives of the people. That's right. Your Majesty will also understand this subject, Song Quan said with a smile. Your Majesty is the Son of Heaven. Naturally, you'll wholeheartedly consider the people. As long as we can stabilize Pang Zhishi, then everything will be easy to handle in the future. Li Qiqian gritted his teeth. He looked at the Northern Ji elders in front of him, then looked at the Imperial Guards behind them who had switched sides. He said with extreme disappointment, Good. You're all very good. At this critical moment, instead of thinking of a way to solve the problem, you want to sacrifice the emperor? What's the difference between doing this and personally handing over to Zhou's country to someone else? Your Majesty is noble and noble. This subject is a vulgar person. This subject also has families, and our families are all commoners. There's no reason for so many commoners to be buried with us, right? Song Quan spoke truthfully. He had a smile on his face, but it seemed like he was mocking Li Qitian. Li Qitian was furious. He loudly berated, "Come, arrest this group of traitors for Zhen." Who would have thought that after he finished speaking, no one around him responded? Only Li Qitian was anxiously stomping his feet. The rest of the people were expressionlessly looking forward. The fear in Li Qitian's heart gradually deepened. His face was no longer as graceful and cautious as it usually was. Some of the Imperial guards heard the order and quickly led people to the entrance of the Imperial study. They firmly guarded the courtyard. "Your Majesty, I'll have to trouble you to rest here for the next few days." Yu Ziqiu, Song Quan, and the others bowed to Li Qitian in unison and planned to leave. Li Qitian roared angrily. "Could it be that you've been bribed by that bastard Pang Xiao? That's why you've teamed up to force the Emperor to abdicate. Zhen is telling you it's useless." Chapter 1188. At this juncture, being able to live a leisurely life was not a blessing, but a curse. Li Qitian looked around in despair. There were only a few spies and a few palace servants led by Xiong Jinshui left. No one else was willing to stand by him. Song Quan, Yu Ziqiu, and the remaining elders of Beiji turned to leave. The Imperial guards and guards they brought in stepped forward and said respectfully with a bit of arrogance, "Your Majesty, please move to the Yangxin Palace Hall." Li Qitian's face was livid. "Why?" "Your Majesty, please move." The guards were tough and did not explain much. They pushed Li Qitian and his entourage towards the Yangxin Palace Hall. Li Qitian's face darkened. He looked left and right, trying to find a way to escape. But as far as the eye could see, all he saw were the Jingji guards, the Jinwu guards, and the Yulin army. They were all walking freely in the palace. Often, they would escort some of the mistresses of the harem to the Yangxin Palace Hall. At this point, what did Li Qitian not understand? Just as he was immersed in worry and panic about the future, these remaining elders of Beiji had been disturbed by the notice of Zhou Lian. They took advantage of this time to secretly arrange for him to be a bargaining chip to surrender to the Pang Xiao, and he did not know that he was in the middle of it. In such a big palace, he could not control his future at all. He was such a failure as an emperor. As soon as he stepped into the Yangxin Palace Hall, he saw the Empress Dowager and the Empress walking quickly. Both of them had a sickly look on their faces. After Brother Hao went missing, the two most honorable women in the harem seemed to have gone mad. They anxiously ordered people to go out and look for him all day long, but there was no progress. They had already worn away all of their education and restraint, turning them into ordinary, resentful women. This made the irritated Li Qitian even more annoyed just by looking at them. Now that they were all caught and brought to the Yangxin Palace Hall, they had to meet even if they did not want to. "Your Majesty, what is going on?" The Empress's voice trembled, and her face was full of panic. The Empress Dowager also said anxiously, "Those dogs of a slave really ate a bear's heart and a leopard's gall, daring to be disrespectful to me. Why don't you order your men to arrest them all?" When the Empress Dowager and the Empress pestered Li Qitian to talk, the rest of the concubines and concubines were also carefully observing this place. When the women talked in low voices, if they were in a good mood, it would sound like the voices of orioles and swallows. When they were in a bad mood, it would only make people more upset. With a flick of his sleeve, Li Qitian pushed the two of them away. He turned around and looked into the hall. The sun was already setting in the west, but no one was lighting the lanterns in the hall. The setting sun was like fire, shining on the paper on the folding fan, casting shadows on the floor, making the hall even darker, making people feel depressed and desperate. Bang! A muffled sound rang out, causing everyone to jump in fright. Even the sounds of chattering stopped for a moment as they looked towards the source of the sound. The door of Yangxin Palace had already been shut. Sounds of hammering could be heard from outside the door. From the shadows, they could tell that someone was using a template to seal the doors and windows shut. "What should we do? What should we do?" "Your Majesty, they want to trap all of us here until we die." "I don't want to die. I'm only 17 years old. I don't want to die here." Everyone was in a panic, and some young concubines and concubines had already hugged their heads and cried bitterly. Li Qiqian didn't answer. He clenched his hands and slowly turned around to look at the shadows on the window lattices. Wooden planks were nailed to the doors and windows, sealing all the window lattices that were pasted with paper. These Northern G elders had made up their minds to rebel and trap him and his concubines here. What these people wanted to do next could be guessed without thinking carefully. Now that he was in such a predicament, where were the Li family's relatives? Where were the relatives who usually acted like a tyrant just because he was the emperor? Perhaps they had already shrunk their necks and fled, or they had already stood in Pang Zhao's camp, wishing that he, the emperor, would disappear as soon as possible. This was the fickleness of the world and the fickleness of human nature. The Empress Dowager finally pulled herself out of her anger. Hearing the commotion outside, she pulled Li Qiqian's hand with a pale face. "Son, what should we do? They're rebelling." Li Qiqian was exceptionally calm. He turned around and looked at the people in the room. "Are you all afraid?" As soon as he spoke, the hall fell silent. Even the sobbing was forcibly suppressed. Li Qiqian's footsteps were heavy, as if they were made of gold. Step by step, he walked towards the pile of rouge and powder and smiled. "Usually, when you see me, you try your best to flatter me, competing with me in beauty, using all kinds of methods. Why don't you care about your appearance today? Look at you. The powder on your face is all smudged from crying. Just looking at you makes me sick. And you? Did I make you sick of looking at me?" He pushed away 2 imperial concubines in disgust. The 2 imperial concubines fell to the ground, sobbing in despair. Li Qiqian said, "You should have understood when you entered the palace that accompanying the emperor has always been bound together for good or ill. Could it be that from the beginning, you only wanted the wealth and honor that I brought you, and didn't want to share my trials and tribulations?" Qin Xie doesn't dare. One imperial concubine hurriedly bowed. The other imperial concubines reacted and also bowed, showing their loyalty. Li Qiqian didn't change his expression at all. At this time, he only felt that it was boring. Everything was boring. The Empress looked at Li Qiqian's back, and then turned to look at the wooden planks nailed to the window outside the hall. Her heart was miserable, but she also secretly felt relieved. Fortunately, she had arranged Hao Ji-er's future. Otherwise, if Aiko were to be locked up with her and suffer with her, how could her heart bear it? Percent, how is the situation in the city? Outside the continuous camp, Pang Xiao looked at the Jing city gates not far away with her hands behind her back. She asked Huzi in a low voice. Huzi said, "Yesterday, we sent out paper kites. The news must have spread everywhere in the city. But yesterday, the city gates were not open, so our people couldn't send out the news. We also didn't send out the carrier pigeons. It's probably because the other side is very strict and the carrier pigeons are too conspicuous. It seems that Wang Fei's method is very useful." Yes, Pang Xiao thought of the words that Qin Yining had said in his ear, "Maybe we can win without fighting." She couldn't help but smile. Qin Yining was the softest place in his heart. Seeing her like a female Zhuge, he would feel heartfelt pride and joy. "Wang Yi, look." At this time, the North City gates in the distance suddenly opened a crack. The crack grew larger until the city gates were completely open. Because the city gates on the other side had always been closed and no one was allowed to enter, the sudden opening of the gates was particularly eye-catching and attracted everyone's attention. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan were teaching Zhao Ji-er and Han Ji-er to play chess in the tent when they heard the discussion outside. Today, the North City gates were actually opened. I don't know if the other city gates are the same. Could it be that the emperor has learned to use the empty city strategy? Chapter 1189. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan looked at each other. Father and daughter could see from each other's eyes that this was within their expectations. "It looks like your method is effective." Qin Huayuan hugged Brother Zhao and placed a piece on the chessboard. A crisp sound came from the wooden chessboard. Brother Han twisted in Qin Yining's arms and curiously craned her neck to look outside the door. Qin Yining was in no mood to play chess. "Mother, outside. I want to go outside to play." "Brother Han, you don't want to learn how to play chess?" Qin Yining pinched Brother Han's soft little cheeks. Brother Han threw her head into Qin Yining's arms and shook her, but while shaking her head. No, Mother, Brother Han wants to go out and see. Gij also wants to go. Brother Zhao was playing with a piece in his hand. He didn't think that he would be implicated if he didn't say anything. He looked at Brother Han in shock. Brother Han had already jumped out of Qin Yining's arms and grabbed Brother Zhao's hand to run outside. Gij, let's go. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. The father and daughter pair walked out of the tent together. The main tent they were in was located in the middle of the camp and was far from the city gates. However, the surrounding soldiers were all talking. Even if they didn't see it with their own eyes, they could guess the situation at the city gates. When the soldiers saw Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan pass by with the two children, they all raised their hands in salute. They were all extremely respectful towards Wang Ye's father-in-law and Wang Fei. When they arrived at the front of the formation, before they could get close to Pang Xiao, they saw the city gates open wide. There were people moving inside the city gates. They didn't know what the people inside the gates were doing. Su Weiji, Xie Yu, and the others had already gathered around Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu. Everyone's expressions were calm. They knew that Li Qitian wouldn't be able to do anything, so they didn't feel nervous at all. In fact, they were even a little excited. Wang Yi had not given them any further instructions, even after so many days at the foot of the city walls. They were already getting impatient from waiting. Although there would definitely be casualties if they launched an all-out attack, which emperor in the past didn't conquer the world on horseback. As long as it was a war, there would definitely be casualties. This was also an established fact that no one could change when the wheels of history were rolling. Daddy! Brother Han ran towards Pang Xiao with his short legs, pulling Brother Zhao with him. Pang Xiao heard the sound and turned around. He couldn't help but laugh. With one hand, he grabbed Han Ge, who had opened his arms to ask for a hug, and with the other hand, he picked Han Ge up as well. Brother Zhao wrapped his arms around Pang Xiao's neck and didn't say anything. He obediently leaned into his father's arms and looked at the city gates in the distance with a puzzled expression. However, Han Ge mischievously tried to climb onto Pang Xiao's neck. He grabbed onto Pang Xiao's hair for support like a restless little monkey. Ji Ziyu watched from the side as Pang Xiao grimaced in pain from being grabbed by his hair. He couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. He waved at Han Ge and said, Han Ge, come to Uncle Ji. Uncle Ji, I want to be high up. Ji Ziyu was stunned. He didn't understand what the child meant. At this time, Qin Yining had already walked over. She said helplessly, this child wants to sit on your shoulders. Don't let him. Then she turned to tell Brother Han, you're a big boy now. Why do you always want to sit on my shoulders? It's fine. Ji Ziyu understood. He placed Han Ge on his shoulders and held onto his small hands. This was a novel experience for Ji Ziyu. He didn't have any children, so it was naturally his first time experiencing the joy of being a father. The child's soft body sat on his shoulders. Even though it didn't weigh much, he was carrying something very important. Ji Ziyu was about the same height as Pang Xiao. The experience of sitting on his shoulders was the same as sitting on Pang Xiao's shoulders. Han Ge was happy. He grabbed Ji Ziyu's hands and shook them. He even swung his short legs and inadvertently kicked Ji Ziyu's shoulders a few times. Uncle Ji, what are they doing? Ji Ziyu said patiently. They probably want to deploy troops. Pang Xiao also let Han Ge sit on his shoulders and supported the child with both hands. Not necessarily. I think they're more likely to surrender. As soon as these words came out, the surrounding soldiers laughed heartily. Zhao Ge and Han Ge had never seen such a scene before. When the two children heard the adults laughing, they also laughed. Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan couldn't help but laugh when they saw the two children sitting on Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao's shoulders laughing so heartily. Qin Yining felt a little emotional. Ji Ziyu looked like an ice, cold person, but he treated Pang Xiao with sincerity. Even when he treated Pang Xiao's son, he was extremely patient and gentle. It was as if he wasn't the iceberg person he used to be. As they were talking, a large patch of red suddenly appeared at the city gates. They were officials wearing the Zhou's court uniforms. There were at least 40 to 50 people. They didn't bring any troops or guards with them, as they quickly walked out to welcome them. In front of the two armies, one side openly stepped forward. Pang Xiao naturally wouldn't show weakness. He turned around and handed the child to Qin Yining. He smiled and pinched Qin Yining's face. "I'll go meet them." Qin Yining hugged Zhao Gu'er. "Okay, be careful." Pang Xiao smiled casually. "Those guys won't be able to do anything to me." He turned around and jumped onto the dark cloud that Huzi brought over. Holding his long saber upside down, he rode out of the crowd alone and headed straight for the group of civil officials on the other side. Ji Ziyu didn't feel reassured. He also handed Zhao Gu'er to Qin Yining. "I'll also go take a look." He didn't wait for Qin Yining to reply before he jumped on a white cloud's back and urged his horse to chase after them. Without the commander's orders, the Tiger Army and the South Pacifying Army didn't act rashly. However, everyone was nervous. Even without Wang Ye's orders, their expressions were solemn, and they were ready to fight at any time. Pang Xiao had already arrived in front of the officials. He pulled on the reins, and Black Cloud's front hooves left the ground. It reared up and neighed. "Everyone, why are you leaving the city in such a grand manner?" Pang Xiao sat upright on his horse and looked down at the people in front of him. Ji Ziyu also arrived at this time. He pulled on the reins beside Pang Xiao and looked inquiringly at Pang Xiao. Without waiting for Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu to speak, the leader of the officials stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings to Wang Yi. We are here to welcome Wang Yi for the safety of the people of the capital." "Oh." Pang Xiao tapped his horsewhip lightly against his palm. "You are here to welcome this king? Could it be that the Son of Heaven has thought things through and ordered you to welcome him grandly?" "Indeed, we are here to welcome you. However, this isn't the Son of Heaven's orders." The leader looked straight at Yu Ziqiu. Now that he saw Pang Xiao, he was intimidated by his aura and didn't speak with as much confidence as he did in the palace. Chapter 1190. Sincerely? You're doing this for the safety of the people? Exactly. The ruler is heartless and does not care about the safety of the people. Anyone who had the slightest bit of love for their people would not only care about their own imperial mausoleum when a natural disaster struck. We have all served in Beiji before and naturally know what it is like to have an incapable ruler in power. The current ruler's actions are no different from the previous ruler of Beiji. We are all well-read people. Back then, we entered the world wholeheartedly for the welfare of the people and to realize our own ideals. However, the current ruler is not a good ruler. Instead, he is becoming more and more incapable. Now that things have developed to this point, the Son of Heaven still does not repent. For his own position, he still does not care about the lives of the people. Therefore, in our view, even if he sits in that position, he will not bring any new atmosphere to the Great Zhou and will not bring any new changes to the well-being of the common people. Therefore, along with Prince Zhongshuan and Duke Dinghua, we all agree with Prince Zhou Lian's suggestion to restore Beiji's title and set things right. Choose a wise ruler for the sake of the people and for the livelihood of the people. Yu Ziqiu spoke endlessly and realized that his righteous words might cause the people in front of him to become impatient. He hurriedly pressed his forehead to the ground to show his sincerity. Song Quan immediately said cleverly, "We have already controlled that person. The people with lofty ideals in the city all agree with our actions and are willing to choose a wise ruler. Now that Tayton has been defeated and the 4 seas have been leveled, it is the best time for our dynasty to enter the Golden Age. We cannot let such a good dynasty be delayed by an incapable ruler." Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu looked at each other. Then, they dismounted from their horses. Pang Xiao asked, "You have controlled the Son of Heaven?" "Yes, the Son of Heaven and his concubines are now controlled in Yangxin Palace Hall. Those officials and noble clansmen who are not willing to ally with us or show neutrality are also controlled by the Jingji Guards and the 5 Cities Warden's office. Now, we only need to wait for Wang Yi to enter the city to deal with them." This declaration of allegiance came suddenly, but it was also within Pang Zhao's expectations. Was this what Qin Yining meant by winning without a fight? Come to think of it, Qin Yining must have guessed it when he gave him advice. It was no wonder that Qin Yining had arranged for the prince of the former dynasty to show up in order to win the allegiance of the old officials of Northern Ji today, since she had brought Lien Shaotsung out at the beginning, and then she had written several denunciations with him from afar. Pang Xiao had a large number of troops in his hands and was confident in this battle. Even if he did not use his mind, he would still be able to win with his strength alone. Therefore, he was not as meticulous as Qin Yining. The current situation made Pang Xiao understand what it meant to win without bloodshed and without a fight. Although the brothers had been rubbing their fists and rubbing their palms for such a long time, they were inevitably disappointed that they didn't get to fight to their heart's content. However, to be able to achieve one's goal without fighting a war or suffering casualties was a feat worthy of being recorded in the history books. When Pang Xiao did not say anything, the old officials of Northern Ji were very worried. They were afraid that Pang Xiao would kill them all with a glare. Ji Ziyu said, "These people may not be trustworthy. Perhaps they have joined forces with the incapable ruler and set a trap for us to fall into." Pang Xiao nodded and felt that what Ji Ziyu said was possible. Yu Ziqiu, Song Quan, and the others paled and immediately broke out in a cold sweat. The two of them anxiously explained, "Wang Yi and Duke, please do not misunderstand. We do not have any ill intentions and would not dare to use tricks to deceive Wang Yi and Duke. There are only so many soldiers in the city, and we are unable to resist. Wang Yi and Duke have brought brave soldiers here. How can we afford to provoke them? Yes, we do not have such intentions. We just don't want the incapable ruler's mistake to implicate innocent people." The old courtiers of Northern Ji who followed behind them all echoed. For a moment, the scene was spectacular. Looking from afar, one could see Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu standing upright. Without beating or scolding, the courtiers in official robes were kowtowing and begging for mercy. Watching from afar, the brave Tiger Army and the South Pacifying Army were whispering about their commander-in-chief's might. Facing such a scene, Pang Xiao felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. When he led the army into the city and broke into Northern Ji's palace, some of these officials immediately stood in line and surrendered. Now history was repeating itself. This time, they happily betrayed the ruler. These people knew how to judge the situation. They may be useful, but they cannot be trusted completely. Pang Xiao looked at Ji Ziyu. "Alan, what do you think?" Ji Ziyu said, "It's not too late to make a decision after we discuss it." Although Ji Ziyu did not mention who to discuss it with, Pang Xiao understood that Ji Ziyu was talking about Qin Huaiyuan. Pang Xiao deeply agreed. He and Ji Ziyu jumped onto the horse and went straight back to the barracks. When Yu Ziqiu, Song Quan, and the others saw Pang Xiao and the others leave, they stood up and dusted off their robes. However, they did not dare to go back to the city immediately. To show their sincerity, they quietly stayed where they were and waited for Pang Xiao's news. Qin Yining, Qin Huayan, Xie Yu, Su Weiji, and the others listened to Pang Xiao's words and did not say anything for a while. After a while, Qin Huaiyuan said, "That's good too. Let's arrange our men outside the city and bring our elites into the city to take a look." "You're right, Master Qin," Xie Yu said. "Looking at them, I don't think they'll dare to do anything. Right now, they're only concerned about their own safety." Pang Xiao nodded and said, "Alan, come with me." "Of course." Ji Ziyu nodded. 5,000 elite soldiers will be enough. "Yes, we can provide support outside the city," Xie Yu said. Qin Huai also said from afar, "I'll provide support outside the city with the two gentlemen. Don't worry." Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining. "Will Sister Yi come with us?" This was a battle between men. Pang Xiao's suggestion to bring Qin Yining along surprised everyone. Qin Yining wanted to go. If he followed Pang Xiao, they would have the upper hand. There was no need to worry about their safety. However, Qin Yining was afraid that if he nodded, Pang Xiao would be criticized. Xie Yu said first, "It's good that Princess Consort comes with us." "Princess Consort, you're not inferior to any man. Many of the schemes we came up with along the way were all thanks to Princess Consort. Now that we're able to take over the capital without shedding any blood, Princess Consort's contributions cannot go unnoticed. Princess Consort is someone who can stand shoulder to shoulder with Wang Yi. There's no need to restrict Princess Consort with the requirements of an ordinary lady. Su Weiji smiled and nodded. This old man thinks so too. Qin Yining looked at Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and said, "Go ahead. Since Wang Yi is willing to let you go, I'll go with you." Since Pang Xiao was willing to go with Qin Yining to pluck the fruits of victory, and Pang Xiao's trusted aides were also willing to submit, as a father, he could only be happy, because his daughter had never been a weak woman who needed to rely on men to survive. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.